5 years old, and I still wake up with a little guy saluting me.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy.
You wanted this, right? You wanted the real deal? That's what this is. Wake up. You're in the middle of it.
You better wake up and listen to what you're saying.
Which is a morning show. Wake up.
What the hell? Wake up, everyone.
We are awake, I believe, on this Wednesday morning. It is night one of the NBA draft. 8 o'clock tonight. Things will commence from New York. And speaking of the Big Apple, we already saw a big splash last night from the New York Knicks that will certainly have some, I would say, draft domino effects off of it that could impact some of the local guys here in the state of Indiana. Good Wednesday morning to you. I'm Kevin Bowen, Andy Sweeney, and Mark Dykton alongside. Again, as we sit here at 7 a.m. on June 26th, the Pacers will not have a first-round draft pick, 36 overall, so the sixth pick in round two is when they will begin their draft. That would be tomorrow afternoon, but obviously we'll see how things play out. But certainly the big news of last night, Woj bomb, 10:30?
Yeah, it was late, wasn't it? Yeah, it was every bit at 10 o'clock, it feels like, yeah.
The Villanova Knicks continue. Mikal Bridges, who has been a very popular trade candidate name thrown around, certainly a name that I've seen, Pacers fans discuss. And he is getting traded for a lot. Off to the New York Knicks for 4 first-round picks. Think odd years starting in 2025. The Knicks will also send a Milwaukee first-rounder in 2025 and a pick swap in round one. That's like the significant part. There's some second-round picks that, frankly, no one really cares about, nor do I have the time to go over all of it. That is a lot for Mikal Bridges, and having said that, I think I like what the Knicks are doing.
Yeah, well, I think this is the other side of the offseason, KB, that we haven't talked that much about. It's all been focused, and a good morning to you. We'll get to KB's parking situation. I like that Butler shirt, by the way.
Thank you.
I need to get me one of those. I like that.
Yeah, I
Thad
figured
Mata give you that one? I like that shirt.
He did not, but I figured with all the Villanova chatter,
well, you might as well.
If I remember correctly, those Villanova boys couldn't win at Hinkle back in the day.
There you go. It is interesting how the Knicks are just all in on this damn Villanova team. It really is. But, so last night.
They're going to get Mike Nardi and Scotty Reynolds.
Boy, I forgot about Mike Nardi. This is the other side of the Pacers offseason, is it not? That, while we can argue, who they'll add, if they'll add anybody, what they do tonight, if they try to package picks or whatever it may be to get into round one. And, we've talked about, Jalen Smith as a player option and, Obi Toppin is a restricted free agent. And are they going to give TJ McConnell more money, Andrew Nembhard more money? We know what they've done already, are going to do officially with Pascal Siakam. And we're focused so much on that, part of any offseason is what does your enemy do? And especially if the Pacers are mostly, which it looks like they very well could be, are mostly team run it back. And good God, we've talked about that with the Colts, KB, that, if the Pacers are mostly team run it back, now it's how are you going to sit there and watch all these other teams make moves? I mean, Philly, they're going to make a couple moves this offseason, and the Knicks make, in my estimation, just a massive move. And then on top of it is, Woj came out last night again, and even watching some stuff on ESPN this morning, the Knicks are going to do everything to also keep OG Anunoby. So just because they get Bridges last night doesn't mean that they're not going to do probably whatever it takes to get OG Anunoby. If that's the case, it's a substantially different team that the Pacers beat in the offseason. And for the Knicks, they're substantially better if they were able to obviously get Bridges, keep OG Anunoby. And then, obviously the health of Julius Randle is another thing. But I think it's a massive move for the Knicks. It's a massive move, as I think there's going to be a mini arms race in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a great move for the Knicks. I want to make that very clear. I mean, you talk about making a modern, let's throw a bunch of wings at the Boston Celtics type of move. That's what this is. And let's just play out the Woj scenario. OG Anunoby, by all accounts, the Knicks are still going to heavily try and re-sign him, and they feel like they've got enough ammo to do that. Let's start there. New York could easily play the run it back card. You know, if there's a team out there that could play it just as much as the Pacers, look at the Knicks.
Oh, yeah, because
we
of their
were a
injuries.
game away from the Eastern Conference Finals without Julius Randle, a 3-time All-Star, with OG Anunoby playing, 2 games? And that I don't even count Game 7 because, frankly, he had no business being on the floor there. So they could play that card, and I don't think many people would question it, really. But they're looking at it and saying, no. Just because we're going to get Randle back, just because OG will be healthy, doesn't mean we're going to stop there. We're going to take advantage of still being in a situation where they're not paying, Halliburton-level contracts and Siakam-level contracts to guys on their roster. So I think it is a brilliant move. I've always been a big Bridges guy. Now, a trickle-down effect off of this, and I think it could very well have some impact in about 13 hours. If you listen to Woj's reporting on this, while they should and want to still pursue OG Anunoby, it sounds like a casualty off of this could be Isaiah Hartenstein,
Right.
who, we obviously watched him be very effective in the postseason against the Pacers. That means that they're going to likely draft at 24 and 25. They're 2 first-round picks right now. And if you look at all these mock drafts really right now, even before last night, a lot of them had them taking a center. So I think there's a chance that we get in here tomorrow morning and we could be talking about maybe Zach Edey is a Knick.
I know. Does
and
he get
maybe
that far?
Khalil Ware is a Knick.
I know.
If you want to play this out, I think Edey is more of the Thibodeau type of fits. But is Edey going to be there at 24 or 25? Khalil Ware seems to be the one that's talked about a little bit more in that range. And could we see New York view it and say, hey, now we got a logjam of kind of guards and wings. Could we package 24 and 25, move up to the mid-teens, wherever we thought, Edey, for example, could be going. So I think that local element, outside of just Knicks and Pacers and the arms race you mentioned in the Eastern Conference, I think that could have a lot of ramifications off of this. But again, I think it's a great move. Mikal Bridges has been incredibly durable throughout his basketball career. Obviously, you've had injury questions with Anunoby. Certainly last year you had them with Randle. But, if you look at just an in-pencil starting lineup, and we'll see how it, plays at the center spot, Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby, Randle, you're bringing Hart and DiVincenzo off the bench. I think we have to remind ourselves, what Hart and DiVincenzo did against the Pacers, they don't do that to that level. They are very fine players. They're good players, but they're not that.
No, they became stars in the postseason.
So,
yeah, there's no doubt about it.
Now they're coming off the bench. I thought Miles McBride was a decent little 8th guy for them, backing up Brunson. Now, they do need to do something at center, it sounds like, financially to make that work. But right now, it's June 26th. We'll update this as the offseason rolls around. But I would probably put New York on the second level, assuming Boston continues to run it back. And I don't know if I would say the same thing about Philly, Milwaukee, and Indiana right now.
Yeah, and again, I'll go back to, I think Philly's going to make they have enough money where I think they make a big move, whether it's a Jimmy Butler or a Paul George. Now, you could easily say, hey, Andy, those guys are a little bit washed up, right? Jimmy Butler misses a lot of time during the regular season. Joel Embiid misses a ton of time. So, Philly, what they feel like they have to do with Boston, close to them winning the title, and then the Knicks making this substantial type move, aggressive type move. I'm interested. Just quickly, Adam Zagoria of SNY, I'm sure you guys know him, college basketball guy as well. He put this out there. Bridges has played in 474 consecutive games. 2 years ago, if you remember, when he got traded from Phoenix to Brooklyn, he actually added another game to his tally. He played 83 games in that particular season.
So is this Thibodeau foaming at the mouth saying, how many minutes can I play this individual?
Thibodeau's got to be thinking,
can I play him 50 minutes a night?
I can play this guy every single minute of every single game. That's exactly where I was going with that. But, to me, I think what's going to be put to the test is the Pacer fan, and again, I have been clear with this, that I think you can sell team run it back. And team run it back means you're keeping it probably means you're keeping Obi Toppin. It also means you're keeping Benedict Mather and Jarris Walker. I think you can still sell team run it back. But for people that have been forceful with that, with the Pacers that, don't want to see them make any moves, that don't want to see Andrew Nembhard go anywhere, that they believe in the maturation of Nembhard and Matherin and perhaps Jarris Walker. I buy in probably too much to the Jarris Walker stuff. They, in the next few, I don't know, it could be hours, days, weeks, month, they are going to, KB, they're going to be tested with how much they're going to hold on to that team running back religion, because the teams around them and perhaps even teams that they beat in the postseason are going to be making moves.
NBA teams don't sit on their couch very often. Now, it doesn't work out always, but like, who had Boston making a trade for Drew Holiday the day before the season started last year?
I know.
I mean, NBA teams just don't sit there quietly. Now, again, not all of it works out. Let me make that very clear.
Look at the Suns.
But the Knicks, on paper, this one checks a lot of boxes. They're obviously sacrificing a ton of picks here moving forward. And, part of it is just reality for the Pacers. So many people have asked. It would be borderline impossible for them to try to make a move for OG Anunoby.
Right.
Financially. I think a lot of, that was some of the chatter last night a little bit there on social media is, what does this mean? Well, when you're paying, Halliburton this money, you're paying Siakam that money, that hamstrings you. And that's why internal roster development, listening to trades for a guy like Andrew Nembhard, those are all things that you just cannot shut the door at, because you aren't sitting here with the opportunity to go out there and I think seriously add somebody of note in a draft pick free agency type of way. So plenty more on this front. Dustin DePirac, covers Pacers, of course, for the Star, going to join us 8 o'clock. Again, as we sit here right now, Andy, nothing from a Pacers standpoint tonight. 36 overall, 49 overall, 50 overall, the 3 picks. I would say goal number 1 for me, can you squeeze into the end of round 1? Ryan Dunn out of Virginia is a name we've thrown out. I think a defensive-minded wing. I know they worked out Jalen Bridges from Baylor. He's kind of another name that, maybe if they sat there at 36 would be somewhat attractive to me. Anything goal-wise for the Pacers you would like to see either get done tonight or tomorrow?
Yeah, I would love to see them get back into round 1 just because I don't put too much value on the picks in the 50s. I do on pick 36. I think at 36, I think the Pacers have proven that they can go get somebody and develop that somebody. I mean, to me, it's got to be someone on the wing. We mentioned Ryan Dunn. Now, he's a kid from Virginia, and when you mention a defensive player, KB, that's what he is, because he sure as hell is not an offensive player. So
well, you could say that about a lot of Virginia guys.
Yeah, you really could. I mean, he'd be one guy that if you ever did get him, it would be one of those odd situations where if he ever played with the big club, he played with the Pacers, everyone, that Carlisle has put on the floor, you feel like, well, you drive the ball, you kick, they can shoot the 3, right? Like, you feel that with just about everyone on the roster. I mean, Siakam doesn't shoot as many 3s, but, you kick out to any of the guards, you feel pretty good. You kick out to Miles Turner. I continually tell you that I think the best shot the Pacers have is the top of the key 3 that you run in a pick and roll with Tyrese Halliburton. To me, if you could move up into round 1 and get someone who you think can really, maybe, I say contribute right away. They have so many players. Again, do they make a move? Would that lessen the depth? If not, you're probably waiting for tomorrow. I've been back and forth whether I think the Pacers are going to stay aggressive or not. And I sit here now on this Wednesday morning, KB, and I just got to say, I don't know, right? I just don't know. If
should this change anything?
If they're going to be, well, let me throw this out. If you're going to be team running back, which a large part of me is, and I totally get it, then you can't get nervous when other teams make moves. If you want to be team running back, and I mean the Pacers are giving you, hey, what we're doing this offseason is we're locking up our guys. TJ McConnell, Andrew Nembhard, if they end up doing that, Pascal Siakam, I don't know. If you get all nervous that another team or the Knicks, they add some players, then how much are you really bought into team running back and how much are you bought in to TJ McConnell and Pascal Siakam and Andrew Nembhard? Like, I don't think you can have it both ways.
Well, I don't think they're fully, I think ultimately it'll be team running back, but I really don't think they are like, hey, we're not answering that that phone.
Listen, I would agree with that.
I mean,
there's no doubt.
Publicly, it's not like they have, stuck this fork in the ground and been like, we are run it back. There are no questions asked. We're not listening to anything. That doesn't strike me how really Kevin Pritchard and company wired there.
Well, Carlisle talked about a third star the day after the season with us.
Right. So, I don't know. I'm just curious if, now seeing stuff like this happen, and it happened to a team that's right there with you. Obviously, we saw it, 7-game series, and albeit, both teams had different injury issues. Now just kind of seeing that play out, does that, add any urgency, any more of a, hey, man, look at this. They just added another wing. He's a two-way guy. He's very durable, et cetera, et cetera. They still feel like they can re-sign Anunoby. Should that impact you at all off of that? And again, I think there is some potential Zach Edey, Khalil Ware impact to this. So we'll certainly hit on that. And that probably will be kind of the main focus today. We'll continue to do our Colts question of the day at some point. I know there's a Chris Ballard piece of audio that we did not play from yesterday that we wanted to get to. And that camp announcement will come later tonight from the Colts. So tomorrow's show, we'll give the rundown on exactly what practice dates look like for the Colts at Grand Park. I know it's obviously an event that a lot of people like to go to. And I will say this quite often. I know I've poked fun, and I think rightfully so, at the Colts making a training camp schedule announcement the night of the NBA draft.
Well, are they doing something special? Why not just announce it at 9 a.m.?
Yeah, there's
What's going
some
on?
fan event up in Westfield.
Okay.
I'm like,
All
nothing says screw the NBA. Like the one night of the offseason the NBA would love to have. Here comes the training camp schedule announcement. The Colts are one of only, I think it's 6, maybe 7 teams that continue to go off-site for their training camp. And, you've been up there at Grand Park.
Oh, yeah.
It's awesome.
Oh, it's beautiful,
it's
yeah.
Unbelievable access. It's free. You're much closer to the players than you will be at Lucas Oil Stadium.
Sure.
So it is tremendous what the Colts continue to do from a public reaching standpoint with training camp. Again, you'll have those joint practices with Arizona August 14th and 15th on that end. But we will continue to update you on the camp schedule for the Colts coming up.
I'm asking this, and I don't know if you know. Being up there, obviously that area is a big field that has cows next door and horses next door. Do you know who owns the property that's right up next to the Colts facility? When I was up there, all the guys were out there on the fence watching, and they had horses behind them. Do you have any idea? Are those the people that sold them the land? I would love to know that.
Well, sometimes I feel like that one guy, he brings I assume his family members, and they just post up on the fence.
Oh, yeah.
And they watch practice.
Yeah, they watch practice every day.
Until Irsay parks his RV there.
Is that where he parks it?
That's where he parks it.
He parks it in front of the guys? Oh, no. Come on, Irsay.
Well, is that someone in Speedway wanting to park their car for the Indianapolis 500? Is that hey, I'm here? You imagine Jim Irsay showing up in your front lawn and the driver getting off the bus and saying, hey, you carefully park back there?
You carefree park there? Well,
Here's a couple hundreds.
Well, you watch Jonathan Taylor walk up. Better be more than a couple hundreds, by the way. You watched Jonathan Taylor walk up last year and get into the bus and leave and everything. So
yeah, they had some fireworks in their backyard.
Yes, they did. So
Lynn Dunn, by the way, joined us at 9. We'll continue to give away a pair of Fever tickets. Their next home game coming up on July 6th. We'll do that with Lynn Dunn at 9.
Yeah, and we'll talk about the only team I was right about last year in the NFL, and they continue to be overrated. The Jacksonville Jaguars. We'll talk with John Shipley from The Athletic at about 8:30. Like KB mentioned, Dustin DePirac coming your way. Now, he was in Paris, not for anything Olympics. I think he was just there to enjoy the Eiffel Tower and whatever else happens in Paris. So
he could have just gone to Georgia Street.
Yeah,
saved a ton of money.
Such a dad joke by Mark.
It really is. And he was ready. He had the mic on. As soon as I mentioned Dustin DePirac,
he was all over
He was ready to go. So that sets up today. Obviously, more on Bridges going to the Knicks. On the other side, we'll get the scores from last night and much more. Your morning check down.
I got to move my car, too.
Yeah. Do you want to do that now, or do you want to do that next break? You're parked illegally, apparently.
Mark, you said this break's a little shorter than the next.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You want to hold out? You want to risk it?
I think the 7:30 break might be better for you.
I'm really going to test here our law enforcement in downtown.
Oh, boy.
No, you can just pull the J Quirk. Do you know who I am?
Do you know who I am?
Kevin Bowen.
Right.
Do you have a generic media pass that you could have put in the window as you illegally parked this morning?
I can't say I efforted that.
All right, so we'll find out if KB's back next segment. Your morning check down. It's a Wednesday. Thanks for hanging out with us. Wake up call 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
93.5. on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Great Lynn Dunn joins us coming up 9 o'clock. Fever actually had an interesting roster move yesterday that I know some people are curious about, so we'll toss that Lynn's way. Here coming up in a bit, Dustin Apirak at 8. It'll be a lot of draft conversation, and Andy Sweeney, it was quite the late-night Woj bomb that will impact what happens today with the start of the NBA draft.
Yeah, and I got thinking as Mikal Bridges goes from the Brooklyn Nets across town and he ends up with the New York Knicks, what I found interesting last night is, and you've said this the last few days, that, sometimes these trades just happen, right? Like you don't know when they're going to happen. You don't know if they're going to happen. And that was kind of the case last night as Mikal Bridges, like I said, goes from a bad team to a really good team in the New York Knicks. And boy, the haul for Sean Marks and company there with the Nets was quite substantial. 4 unprotected first rounders go from the Knicks to Brooklyn 2025, 27, 29, and then 2031. And then a protected 2025 first round pick via the Milwaukee Bucks. The Knicks also send an unprotected 2028 pick swap to the Nets in 2025. So some second round selections in there as well. It is a haul for the Nets. And now, we've talked so much. I would say the only way we haven't talked about this, KB, and we obviously aren't caring too much about the Nets, but the Nets now 4 picks in the 2025 draft. This draft tonight and tomorrow is seen as rather weak. Next year is seen as a much better draft. Obviously, you think of Cooper Flagg, who right now is at Duke, and others. Next year in 25 is seen as a much better draft, and the Nets will have 4 picks, including their own, in that draft. So they get a haul, and Bridges average about 20 points a game, shot over 40% from 3. He ends up now with the New York Knicks.
I'm just thinking, where will we be in 2031?
It's a great question.
This show's still on the air.
I worry about that every single day.
Like, will Max Bowen have armpit hair in 2031?
Well, turning 40, I got to start taking a bunch of tests and stuff.
Oh, boy.
Where they start looking at your body. They're like, all right, let's see how much damage you did in the first 40 years of your life. And it's going to be substantial.
You hear that rubber glove snap by
say
the doctor? All right, Mr. Sweeney.
They're sticking things and prodding places you never thought they would. All right, last night on the diamond there, the Reds lose, the Cubs lose, the Indians lost. The Cardinals got postponed.
What a miserable night.
Crappy night is what you're saying.
What an absolute miserable night.
The White Sox have lost 60 games.
Did you see Hunter Green, your
Guardians
boy?
lost. Hunter Green's puking. Max Bowen puked in his crib last night.
No.
Hunter Green puked on the mound.
Oh, no.
Usually Hunter Green's pretty good against the Pirates. Unfortunately, that did not happen. So, ugly night of baseball. Again, the Indians on the road all week long before they start a long homestand July 4th through the 14th.
Just a reminder.
Savannah Bananas, right? In the building this weekend?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, Jimmy Cook's going.
Yeah, that was a good time last year.
On Friday, he said he's going. How about that?
That'll be a packed house over at Victory Field.
They sold out Fenway Park.
Yeah.
A couple weeks ago.
Like, they are a legit marketing gem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we went last year.
Can't
it was
believe
a fantastic time.
We'll go over mock drafts, but obviously NBA draft tonight. We'll get to the Jonathan Givony sound, but man, I tell you, Zach Edey, I'm so interested in him. Jonathan Givony thinks he's a starter in the NBA. His latest mock draft, we've talked a lot about him on ESPN. He actually has Edey. He had Edey 15 to the Heat. I don't know what the hell changes in the last couple days. He now has him 17 to the Fighting J.J. Redick and LeBron James there with the Los Angeles Lakers. A lot of mock drafts as well have Khalil Ware mid-20s. I'm looking at one here from Givony, 24. Khalil Ware going to the Knicks. We've talked a lot, probably too much about the Knicks today. Reminder, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, it all begins. You can hear it right here tonight on The Fan.
5 minutes per pick tonight, 4 minutes per pick tomorrow. Again, 4 o'clock's the start time tomorrow for round 2. A couple other items of note. Again, we'll have the Colts training camp announcement coming up later tonight so some fans can start to play out what their schedules could look like late July, early August up at Grand Park. And it feels like a weekly, almost a daily occurrence where you're just blown away by the TV ratings for the Indiana Fever. Yesterday, their game with the Sky over the weekend. That was ESPN, right? 4 o'clock?
Yep.
So Sunday afternoon, 4 o'clock, 2.3 million. That is the most watched WNBA game in 23 years. It's the third time this season the Fever have played in a game where they have reset that stat.
Right. It's unbelievable.
That they have played in a game where now that is the new most watched game in 23 years. And I think something interesting to note, obviously the Fever games have been huge. And I forget exactly who sent this out yesterday, but if you look at the other games in the WNBA this season,
I have the stat. Go ahead.
Not Caitlin Clark, not Fever related.
Right.
Right now, those games are averaging 428,000 viewers. If you look at this time last year, those games averaged 301,000. So even the non-Clark, obviously the Clark games are routinely over 1 million, but even the non-Clark games, a significant increase for the rest of the league this season.
It was Michael Mulvihill.
That was it. Thank you.
I don't know exactly what he does, but he put this out. So the WNBA viewership season to date over all networks, Caitlin Clark games are averaging 1.184 mil. All other games, like you mentioned, are at 428,000. And then all games not involving, or all games last year at this time, just 301,000. So, yes, it shows that the WNBA is up, but it also shows that you put Caitlin Clark on your network. And I figured the ESPN game would be the top dog, right? Nothing else was on. There was no U.S. Open. It was on a station that everybody has. It was on a better time than the earlier one. Wasn't the Sky game a couple weeks ago, like noon, something like that?
Yeah, but that was a CBS game.
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, I guess you're right. It was early, though, right? Isn't noon a little bit early?
Well, I just
Church, lunch,
and
that sort of thing.
I continue to think, I mean, this is a legit rivalry, which, you know, again, when you're playing 4 times in a 40-game season, this is great for the WNBA, great, obviously, for the Fever. Tomorrow night, 10 o'clock at Seattle. The Fever will start their second West Coast road trip of the season.
Reminder, Lynn Dunn going to join us at 9 o'clock. Dustin DePirac at 8 o'clock. On the other end, Matt Painter and Jonathan Givony both talking about Zach Edey. Plus, Chris Ballard said something. It's going to be our Colts question of the day. We'll do it next, hanging out with you until 10 o'clock. It's a Wednesday here on The Fan.
Day one.
The Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, Wednesday morning here. It is NBA draft night. Nothing for the Pacers. They would be at 19 overall had the Pascal Siakam trade not happened, obviously. That worked out for them. I am curious, if they were at 19.
What would you have wanted?
Would Zach Edey make sense?
Yeah, I'm going to say the way they play, probably not. Let me ask you this, having been through this in this particular spot, Trace Jackson Davis last year maybe fits this mold. Are you happy at all? Maybe happy's not the word, that we're not having to do the Pacers and Zach Edey dance this draft season?
Yeah, I think the Pacers are probably happy about that.
I think the Pacers are probably happy. I just don't think he kind of fits what they do. I don't know. Plus, I think he can be he might be able to be a starter some places in the NBA next season.
I'm pretty optimistic on Zach Edey at the NBA level. I also think teams right now, first off, I think he's a little more athletic defensively than people give him credit for. I also think you see teams a little bit more willing to play some zone nowadays in the NBA. Now, obviously, he's going to have to, get out of the paint. Defensive 3 seconds isn't a rule in college, et cetera, et cetera. But I do think that is an aspect of this team that, could be there, or, I guess of the league that could be there a little bit more than that. So, that was just kind of a curious thought that I had.
Yeah, if they were sitting there at 19, let's move Zach Edey aside. I think there's a chance Zach Edey is there at 19. If I had to guess, he would have been off the board. If I had to guess, and the Pacers were sitting there at 19, and they didn't trade their pick with the Pascal Siakam stuff, I would say that they would not draft Edey, but I would also feel very strong that he would not be there. And because of that, we haven't really talked about who they would have taken, and they could have got a guy like Ryan Dunn from Virginia at 19, right? They probably could have got him. So, we'll never know. It probably would have been more of a defensive player. I don't know what people think. He's more of an offensive guy, but I don't know what they think of Terrence Shannon, for instance. That name is out there. And of course, what he had to go through in the offseason to get his name cleared and everything else. But I know in the second round, that 36th pick, guys like Tyler Smith, who people probably don't remember. He played for, I think, the G League this past year. He was recruited by everyone, was actually committed at one point, I think, to Baylor before he moved on. He was a Texas kid. So I think 36 still has some value for the Pacers. But unfortunately for us, we'll have to sit there and we'll have to watch everything tonight.
The car was towed.
Yeah, I was wondering what you wanted to do with that. Do you want to tell everyone the story of what happened here? Go ahead.
So pull into probably no one cares, to be honest with you.
No, they do care.
I'll give 90 seconds of venting here. Pull into our garage here on this Wednesday morning. It's backed up onto Illinois Street for those can kind of picture downtown, just south of Buca de Beppo. The guy in the front of the line is saying that the arm isn't working, et cetera, et cetera. His boss is on his way to figure it out. Well, I've probably got just a couple minutes to really sit in this line. Once I realized the line's not moving, I thought, all right, I'll park in our alleyway and move it during one of these early breaks in the show. So I park in the alleyway thinking that I am, somewhat out of the way. And I just went down there during the break and the car is gone.
God. That is a horrible way to start a Wednesday.
When you parked in the alley, I was worried for you. I don't mind saying it. I was worried.
Why didn't you chirp up and say, maybe I should have gone during the first break?
Well, I think you were probably gone pretty early. My guess is somebody was watching you.
There was nobody in the alley.
There was somebody. There was someone looking out.
There's probably a camera somewhere.
Yeah, a camera, someone looking out a window. There was a troll. There was some troll who was watching you park. I'm telling you, you were in here at 5 till 6:55, let's say something like that. That car was gone before we easily went to our first break at 7 o'clock. It was gone by 7:15.
Should I give more credit to the tow service?
Yeah, so where do you have to go? Do you know? Because that's going to be every bit of, what'd you say, $170?
How about that efficiency?
I feel bad for you, man.
Literally.
I know. We've all been there.
Getting the old car towed. I forgot how expensive that is.
Yeah, that's and they. By the way, they might only take cash.
Really?
Did you check on
in
that?
2024?
Hey, listen, there are some places that only take cash.
Well, I sure as hell don't have that type of money cash-wise.
Want to pass around the hat here?
Is working man's friend?
On
What's
level
going
4?
on here?
And of course, this is the one day where it's like, Max is puking last night. Can you
Sure.
come home, as quick as possible after the show, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, dear Lord.
You had to literally have been like 2 minutes behind me, which blows my mind.
Well, it's funny when I called and she picked up. Obviously you go over and look at the sign and you see the number. I call. She goes, "Oh yeah, the Honda Civic." I'm like, I'm like,
you were the first one of the morning.
I'm like, are we celebrating this one?
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Pop champagne. They set a record.
Remember that show that was staged? Remember lizard lick towing? You're gonna get licked. Remember that?
Oh, yeah.
The lizard lick? I know Mark would.
Yeah, it was on like True TV
Yeah, it was on
before they had Impractical Jokers raking in the dough.
And
before they had playing games?
And it was, before they had the NCAA tournament. And it was on True TV, but there was nothing true about it. It was all staged and written and everything else. Well, I feel bad for you. How far away is the spot? I don't know
it's
the
about
toe
10
spots.
minutes. Can I twist either of your arms to
Yeah,
try and drive me over
we'll
there?
Be available.
Post-show?
Sure.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
I feel bad for you. I was worried it might happen, but, you thought you might get out there in 20 minutes or so, right? Now, you didn't put the four-ways on, right?
I thought that would attract attention.
That would attract attention to the car.
Was that a mistake?
Now we're just second-guessing it. We're Monday morning quarterbacking you. I would say it's not a mistake, but, now if you had it over to do again, you knew you were going to get towed, maybe you pop those on.
Did you park, like, right next to the Conrad? Because that's usually where delivery trucks come. That would be my only thing is they had a delivery truck come in, and then your car was sitting there, and, like, we got to get this thing out of here.
I really thought I was, like, at an area where it was still clear for like any semis or any delivery trucks whatsoever. It's not like I parked in front of the garage that like they literally drive the truck right up to it and start unloading.
Yeah,
it.
There's not like a Wonder Bread truck that you were blocking if you had to. Do you think the majority of our listeners feel bad for you and have sympathy or empathy, or do you think well, I do as well, or do you think there's a group that say, KB, you're not above the law? Okay, go park somewhere else. You're not above the law. You needed to learn your lesson, big guy.
It's funny. I actually thought about parking on the circle, but like it signs like galore.
Oh,
no parking at all with the what's it called, the Spark and everything on there. Boy, I think everybody has like a tow story in their lives. So
we've all been there.
We were telling tow stories while you were gone, not knowing that you were towed already.
Unbelievable.
Mark got towed in Chicago, which I would imagine owning a tow company in Chicago is probably rather profitable. Would be my guess.
I would say that as well.
I know several buddies who have been here for. Well, I remember when Donovan. I'm sure you guys don't care about this. Remember when Donovan Mitchell was with U of L? They lost to Wagner and John Beeline in Michigan and Gamebridge in the round of 32.
Was that the COVID tournament?
No, it was not. It was before the COVID tournament. It was well before the COVID tournament.
The other Wagner?
Because U of L actually did not make it the COVID tournament year with Chris Mack. And you had one of the Wagners and you had Donovan Mitchell on that team and everything else. And I know a couple people who kind of did what you did. Parking downtown was rather scarce and they were running behind for the game and they just pulled in an alley and they just parked somewhere and they all got towed. So that was a good weekend as well. Is your wife mad at you right now? She can't be happy with you right now, right?
Less than ideal. She's more worried about her son on that end. I thought Brad Stevens had an interesting comment about the draft yesterday. He mentioned, because, I think this is a question I've had about this year's class. Oh, this draft sucks, blah, blah, blah. It's, why would anyone want picks in this draft? And Brad Stevens is like, okay, I obviously don't pay a ton of attention to the high end of this draft because, they're drafting, whatever, at the final pick of round 1. But he's like, in this range, in the meat of the draft, he's like, this is the same draft. Like, there's plenty of depth, or however you want to describe it, second, third tier guys.
Sure.
He's like, it's a pretty normal draft in that area. And I would think that that's good news for the Pacers. Again, the Pacers obviously are not going to be flirting with the top 10, top 15 of this draft. And certainly once you hear names called tonight, you're going to be like, who the hell are these guys? And the film's going to be grainy as hell on some of them. And, you're going to have even college guys drafted that high that you probably didn't really know of. So, that element to this draft, I do think is something to keep in mind with the Pacers of like, okay, in the range of 30-ish, it still should be normal. Now, Stevens did mention, he says the later you get in this draft and future drafts, and as you start to build undrafted classes moving forward, he says the NIL element is a real deal. And that has created less depth later in drafts because guys are more willing to go back to school, knowing that, the second round guarantees are not great at all.
Look at Hunter Dickinson. I think he's
Sure.
probably the
Trace
best
Jackson
example.
Davis,
Trace
was
Jackson
an
Davis.
example. Obviously,
Yep.
Edey was an example. I think Edey's been on the record of saying if he had a first round guarantee last year, he probably would have left. But then when he realized, wait, I can make, pretty good money by going back to Purdue, that's when he realized, that was a better, avenue for him. So just something to keep in mind about this year's draft when you hear so many people say it's a poor draft. Well, sure, at the top, probably is. But as you move along, and you're in the Pacers range, not the end of the world.
Let me ask you this. I mean, even if the number one, let's just use the number one and number two pick. So it's guys that we don't, it's Alex Sarr, who is from Australia, is probably going to go number two. And then the Zachariah Reciter that we've talked about. I know I'm butchering that name.
That was a great effort
from
by you
France.
in the last name.
Again, just say it fast, but say it with confidence, and you can fool most people. If those two picks, KB, were college basketball American players, would the conversation be different? That's number one. Number two, I think some of this still has to do with, and it's, in my estimation, it's going away. But you look at the G League, which is something that I don't think ever worked the way that the NBA thought it was going to work. I thought they were going to pull kids and get, and be able to put some teams together. And then NIL came out and the Wild West came out in college basketball, and it really squashed the G League because you could get NIL, you could get paid and still have the, university college experience, which you got to imagine for these guys, whether it's 1 year or 2 years, is probably a lot more fun than what you go through with the G League. But, whether it's Matas Buzelis, who's probably going to be a top 5, 6, pick or something like that. You're looking at probably 3 guys. So you add the foreign influence with some American kids that we don't know because they didn't play college basketball. And that's where you get this thought. And it's funny, on our Google document, I wrote this down. What if we're all just wrong on this draft just being so bad? I got to be honest, I'm not excited for this draft. I like Reed Shepherd a great deal, but if you're telling me he's the 3rd best player, he's not an above the rim player at all. You're telling me he could go number 3 overall. I kind of roll my eyes. Part of me still rolls my eyes and says, how good of a draft is this? But for teams like Brad Stevens mentioned, KB, like the Celtics, that are drafting, whether it be the middle part, out of the lottery, back end, because you're a good playoff team, it's probably not that much different. I don't know. Just with I think we're still doing this, even though the foreign player influence is so prominent and prevalent in the NBA today. We still are not quite there that we can look at kids from France or Australia at the very top of the draft, and that automatically in our minds makes it a bad draft. I don't know. Part of me is kind of rooting for this draft class to be better just because everyone's crapping on this draft class.
Zach Edey, in all likelihood, tonight will become the 2nd highest Purdue player drafted under Matt Painter. Jaden Ivey, of course, 5th overall just a couple years ago. Obviously, the late Biggie Swanigan went 26 overall. Jawan Johnson, 27. So I feel like in most mocks, you're seeing Zach Edey above even 26, 27. For what it's worth, if he does sneak into the lottery, I know maybe percentages of that aren't super, super high, but if he does, Glenn Robinson, Jaden Ivey, those are your Purdue lottery picks since 85. So that would be, or I should say the lottery was created in 85. So just a couple Purdue items to note on Edey.
I would like to see Edey taken in the lottery, but I'm consistent with this. If he goes out of the lottery and can find an established general manager and coach, and I know Miami you might think fits that mold, the Knicks, I'm not sure the Lakers do, but if he can go somewhere that is solid, I think that matters so much. ESPN's Jonathan Givony, this is yesterday. The other voice you'll hear is Brian Windhorst. They were talking about Edey, and I think Givony, who's the draft guy for ESPN, it's about 90 seconds, KB. I think he is as high on Edey as maybe any of these analysts are. He thinks he could be a top 10 pick.
I think he's going in the top 20.
Okay.
He could go as high as 9 to Memphis. Memphis, like we talked about with the Klingon segment, you hear them a lot moving up, possibly. If they don't move up, they need a center in the worst way, and Zach Edey is clearly the second best center in this draft after Klingen. I look at him and I say, what if Jonas Valanciunas was 6 inches taller? That's what Zach Edey is to me.
6 inches taller, my God. Yeah, he's 7'4".
He's 7'5" in shoes, 7'11" wingspan, 9'7" standing reach. He dunks without jumping. He plays incredibly hard. He's physical. He's competitive. He draws fouls at a ridiculous rate. He offensive rebounds at a ridiculous rate. He's the best screener in this draft, which counts for a ton in today's NBA with, the way that everybody plays pick and roll. To have a guy like that who gets you open every time and then just sucks in the defense, because you could throw the ball anywhere you want and Zach Edey will go catch it. He's got incredible hands. And then he just, everything's a dunk. I mean, he led the NCAA in dunks by a mile because he barely needs to jump to dunk.
He has to jump 3 inches to dunk. Yeah,
exactly. So, and then, the rebounding, he has improved incredibly on the defensive end. He's really hard to shoot over because he plays so hard and he's so freaking long, and he's really improved his technique. People talk about him, they say he's a finished product, whatever. We need to remember he's been playing basketball for 6 years. This guy was a baseball player, he was a hockey player, he was everything but basketball. He's still, he's gotten better and better every year. His conditioning has improved. He was playing 40 minutes a game in the NCAA tournament. He never came off the floor. And so I just think when you put him in a smaller role in the NBA where he can actually go out and foul people, which he was not allowed to do at Purdue, he's going to be awesome. I think he's a starting center in the NBA.
How about that? A starting center in the NBA. What's also interesting, JMV had Matt Painter on yesterday, and Painter said something similar, that in shorter spurts, Edey's going to be allowed to go out and foul. Painter wouldn't let him foul because if he exits the game, they don't win the game.
Means be more aggressive defensively. Like, you didn't see him be the crazy dominant rim protector and defensive presence. I mean, we'll get more into this with Dustin DePerrick on the other side. I think the Knicks are a great fit for him, especially with last night's news.
I hate it.
I think the Knicks are a great fit, and I know they're picking at 24 and 25. The Knicks also, I think, pick somewhere in the 30s, so they could wheel and deal a little bit if they feel like Edey's going to go a little bit higher. That, to me, would make a ton of sense for him.
Yeah, Dustin DePerrick will join us next. He was just in Paris. We'll kind of check up on him, what he did in Paris, and what he thinks the next 2 days will look like for the Pacers, and obviously the reaction there to the trade with Mikal Bridges going to the Knicks. We'll do it next. Hour number 2, around the corner. Wake-up call on this Wednesday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Doc, I don't know what's wrong with me. All I think about is football. It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
8 o'clock hour here on a Wednesday, 12 hours from now, the NBA draft. And boy, I feel for our next guest. I greatly appreciate him waking up for us now. Dustin Apirak from the Indy Star, covers the Pacers, is with us. So, Dustin, you just sit there and you watch and you watch and you watch tonight, and you think to yourself, am I really going to stay up till midnight watching the draft and the Pacers will do absolutely nothing? Is that what tonight looks like for you?
Yeah, pretty much, but I stay up past midnight all the time, so that's not a big deal.
No, perfect.
It's not a big deal at all. So, doing it without any kind of deadline pressure, write something after just to kind of update who's actually still going to be on the board. So it's an easy night for me. Don't have to do much. Obviously, tomorrow is a little bit more, I don't know, intense isn't the word. Obviously, we've got stuff going down to the facility and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, that's just it. Just keep your eye on it until the end. And it does get, you do tend to get a little bleary by, even if you're just watching it for the heck of it, by pick 28, 29, 30, you're like, okay, who even are these guys at this point? But yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting, I think, just to see how they operate and just how tonight changes things for them, if it changes at all, if any of their kind of targets go off the board. And if they do try to trade in, they've obviously got 3 picks, and I don't know, it's not going to be easy to make 3 guys, work. I mean, because they do have a couple two-way guys they already have. So just going to be intrigued. It's not high-level drama for these guys in this particular draft after a couple of lottery picks and going into this one without a first-rounder. But, there is some level of intrigue, I think, to this draft for these guys.
So 36, 49, and 50s where they select. Obviously, round 1 is the first 30 picks. In the NFL, Dustin, the appeal to trade into the round 1 is you get an additional year contractually for these guys. You get a 4-year deal, these teams, and then they get a 5th-year team option. That's the appeal. You see teams, I think the Ravens did it with Lamar Jackson, for example. They traded in that final pick of round 1, took Lamar Jackson, and they didn't have to pay him the big money till later. NBA-wise, what outside of just hey, that player we didn't think would be there at 29 is on the board, what would be that appeal for Indiana in climbing, into round 1 by packaging some of those picks later tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would just be to consolidate and say this is the guy we want, and not having to make the other roster moves that they would have to make. Just obviously you look at their two-way guys, Oscar Tshiebwe, Quentin Jackson, Isaiah Wong. If they like those guys and they don't want to, move on from them, basically, then you're not bringing in bodies that you have to have, that you have to kind of make decisions with. And I think that would be some of, I guess, the appeal. I don't think it's worth it. I don't think they will trade up to the first round. At the end of the day, I think there's still going to be a lot of people left that they won't have to pay as much in the second round, basically that are guys that they're targeting and interested in. Probably whoever they pick is not going to have a clean shot at being in a rotation early. They don't really have an opening, honestly. Basically, that a person they would draft would really have a shot at. So it makes as much sense for them to bring a second rounder in as to go after a first rounder. But it's just, I think consolidation would be the only reason, would be the biggest reason to do it. If they just don't want to bring in this many bodies into the organization at this point in time and trying to find space for them and try to make decisions on some of the other guys, that'd be the only reason. I ultimately just don't think they will. But I guess there's just a non-zero possibility that you have to keep your eyes open for.
Boy, you're cursing it, Dustin, and Dustin Apirak with us. You think you're going to have an easy night? You just wait. You never know.
Totally.
The Pacers, the Pacers package those picks and they move up. I'm kidding. Dustin Apirak with us from the Indianapolis Star. He joins us on the Payless Liquors hotline. Reading some of your stuff on the website yesterday and today. Can you talk to how the Pacers have got ready for this draft? It seems like they have brought in older players, right? Knowing that they're going to be taking second-round picks. And then you guys have talked a lot on the site about Harrison Ingram. People remember him from North Carolina. Nikola, is it Jurisic? Is that how you say it? From Serbia is a name that's worked out, I know, for the Pacers. So let's just focus on 36. I know it's not tonight, it's tomorrow, but how have the Pacers prepped for this draft? And then I think 36 is still, you're going to get someone of value and someone who could end up being in your rotation.
Yeah, no, I think what's interesting, and I saw Brad Stevens had some interesting comments involving NIL and how it's affecting the draft. I mean, you're obviously seeing a lot of guys stay around longer. And one thing that Brad Stevens mentioned is like, well, the money that they're making on NIL is more than you make on a two-way. And I thought that was a really interesting way of putting that. That these guys don't have to come out, and they might actually be losing money if they're mid to late second round guys going on a two-way contract. And so it's keeping guys in 4 and 5 years until you get these guys that have 4 or 5 years experience. I think, it was interesting that how often Rick Carlisle mentioned Ben Shepherd's 4 years of college and how much it made a difference. And so I think where that all plays in is if you have a guy who doesn't crack the rotation early, but is able to just sort of stay ready and be able to plug and play when you need him, that experience helps that cause. Having a guy that's mature enough to say, hey, all right, I'm not going to be in the rotation early. I just have to kind of stay ready and wait till my number's called, and it might be half a season. And in Ben Shepherd's case, it was, and certainly whoever they pick here might be in the same situation. But injuries happen over the course of 82 games. You have trades that move things along. And that's what happened for the Pacers last year. Obviously, they ended up moving Buddy Hield and Bruce Brown, as Brown is part of the Siakam deal, and Benedict Mathurin gets hurt. So all of a sudden, Ben Shepherd has to play. There was a spot open for a wing, and he had to play. And he wasn't really part of the plans early, but became that. And so I think you're looking at somebody who might be in a similar situation. You don't know what's going to happen over the course of the year. You don't know what you're going to need, basically when there's all the wear and tear and all the things that just can happen in the course of an NBA season. So I think that's what they're looking for is guys that they believe that they can sit tight for a while and not necessarily need to be part of the rotation. And then when their time comes, they can step in and do what you need. Just be a guy who can, who can defend, who can move the basketball, and just be a smart, high basketball IQ guy that you don't have to spend a lot of time developing to be able to trust him out there. So I think that's a lot what they're looking for. I think it was like, 29 of the 30 college guys they looked at were 3-year starters.
Wow.
Basically, the only guy who wasn't was Adem Bona, who I think is an interesting talent guy who started almost every game he played at UCLA in 2 seasons. And, I think they have to at least consider, bigs, because just in case Jalen Smith opts out, I think you might want to have a third center there behind Isaiah Jackson. But I think that's really what they were looking for. Is they just put a lot of emphasis on experience, and certainly at least in the workouts in terms of who they were looking at.
Yeah, I feel like it's interesting the second round. You get teams that do, go the 4-year guy route, or then the other teams go the total reverse, and they say, hey, let's go international, see if we can, throw some dart and pray it hits the bullseye. Yeah, at some point. It's kind of fascinating to see how teams react in round 2. Dustin Apirak with the Star joins us here, obviously covers the Pacers. Certainly the major news item from last night, Dustin, was Mikal Bridges and that trade getting sent from the Nets to the Knicks. It was a slew of picks that New York is sending back to Brooklyn. The Villanova Knicks continue. What did you make of that deal in terms of kind of the hierarchy of the Eastern Conference, and if the Pacers should have any reaction to that deal?
Yeah, no, very interesting move, and I think it does make the Pacers have to reconsider if they were thinking basically just run it back. I mean, obviously it's a little bit tight for them because of how the cap situation is going to be with just basically with Siakam now having obviously intending to sign a max deal. But I mean, it's a very interesting move. I think. What I thought was also intriguing was right after you have that trade, I think that everybody's initial thought was, that means they're losing Anunoby, because he opted out of his or declined his player option yesterday. And it's like, okay, well, that means they presume they're going to lose him. They're just signing Bridges or trading for Bridges to replace him. But I mean, right after that, Woj has reporting that no, they intend to get him too. They intend to be that wing heavy. This is a deal made with the understanding that, hey, look at the Boston Celtics. Like, you have to be wing heavy if you're going to compete. And so I don't know how, Tibbs is going to feel about that, because he likes the centers and the shot blockers. And obviously they still have Mitchell Robinson in. It seems like they're expecting to not be able to sign Isaiah Hartenstein, which changes things significantly. And Hartenstein was a big part of that series. I mean, that's a big reason why the Knicks won the games that they won against the Pacers. So it changes things up. I mean, you're talking some big time players they've got at the wings now, and that sort of Novacek's crew. But also if they get Anunoby, they're going to have some depth there as far as just really high level wings. So I don't know if that means the Pacers have to look for more of them. I think the Pacers obviously have a bunch that could develop, that are, have been really productive so far that are young that could get better. Aaron Nesmith, obviously. And you certainly have Benedict Mathurin, who's been waiting in the wings there, with his injury and working his way back, and you're going to see if he develops. But they probably have to at least look and see what's out there and see what's possible. I don't know what is, again, because it's going to be, they can make some things happen with trades. I don't think they have the room to be able to go get, a big free agent. I mean, I don't know if they can even put a big offer on the table to Anunoby to try to pry him away. So I don't even think that works necessarily from a cap situation. So yeah, they have a lot of questions they're going to ask because that's I think they knew this already, but you weren't going to expect everybody else to stand pat. It's all of those other Eastern Conference teams. The Pacers don't get to start in that second position necessarily behind the Celtics, even though they, obviously got to the Eastern Conference Finals. That doesn't mean that they get to be the second best team in the East starting the year. All of these. The Bucks, the Sixers in particular, have a huge amount of cap space that they can pretty much recreate that team around Embiid and presumably Maxey, who they'll presumably give a max deal to. They have to consider that a lot of other teams are not going to be standing pat and going to be getting better, so they have to consider what they're going to be competing with.
Dustin Dupirac joins us from the Indianapolis Star, talking some Pacers here, getting ready for the draft tonight, 7 o'clock. You can catch it on the Fan. Dustin joins us on the Payless Liquors hotline. All right, I want your gut reaction on the guys on this roster. We're talking about moves the Pacers could make. I mean, there's also, they could do the Chris Ballard with the Colts. They could do team run it back and extend a lot of these guys. I think I saw on the Star, your gut's telling you that Jalen Smith will opt out of his player option. So Jalen Smith, Obi Toppin, and then the potential of re-upping TJ McConnell and Andrew Nembhard this offseason. Those four particular guys, Dustin, I'm throwing a lot at you. What does your gut tell you about those four guys?
Yeah, I'll go. McConnell first. I'm presuming that they'll put together will ultimately be a pretty team-friendly deal. I mean, they're not going to have to throw a massive extension at TJ McConnell to keep him, but I think they will. I think they're really happy with what they got out of him. I think they continue to see value from what he brings. I mean, I think it was just a fascinating narrative last year, obviously going from thinking, oh, well, he's not necessarily, you got to get Nembhard to be the second unit point guard, so there's not really a role for McConnell. Hang in there, buddy, and we'll trade you when we have to, well, we need this guy. We can't win without him. And that's certainly kind of the stance that they seem to be taking now. Rick Carlisle obviously loves him. The franchise obviously loves him. And so it seems like a multi-year deal is certainly in the works. I mean, if you can, take it to the bank, they're going to extend, guarantee that contract throughout the year, I think, and then I think you'll see something, for a couple years beyond that. Obviously, they're not going to throw a max deal at him or anything in those lines, but they'll get some, he'll get a raise and, basically get a nice deal that keeps him around. And I think they certainly, it certainly seems like Chad Buchanan wants to keep, and Kevin Pritchard want to keep him in Indiana through the rest of his career, however long that's going to be. And he's playing his best basketball at 32, so you don't know how much longer he can hang in. I mean, because he's just a phenomenally well-conditioned athlete. Nembhard, I think, is going to be a harder thing to do because if I were Andrew Nembhard, I wouldn't sign an extension. Basically, just because there's, I think there's a limit on what they can give him. I think it's like 4 years, somewhere in the $72 million range. And I think if you're him, just basically, especially after the playoff performance he had, you're thinking that, someone else might be willing to give you starter money, just starting point guard money, if you eventually hit free agency in a couple of years. So if you're kind of limited, kind of capped on the extension that you can get now, I mean, I hold out for another year. I mean, you don't have to do it right now. So, I mean, if I was him, I wouldn't do it. Basically, I would see just what kind of other money is there. I mean, certainly if you're the Pacers, you try to get it done because it's team friendly. But, be prepared. I would imagine for Nembhard to say, nah, I kind of want to hang around on this. I want to, I want to see how much of a heater I'm on, and what I can, not even necessarily get on the open market because I think they'll have another year to offer an extension. But in the same way, it's to say, okay, I want you guys to kind of feel a little bit of pressure there to make a bigger offer because you're capped as to what you can give me now. So I want to see what you can when you're not capped. As far as that's concerned, I'm going to guess Jalen Smith opts out and sees what's available on the open market. Obviously he was not, really any part of the playoff rotation, but he had a really good bench, a really good season for a bench guy. And if you look at his overall numbers, I think it was averaging somewhere around 20 and 11 per 36 minutes. That's a pretty, that's a heck of a year. And obviously shot the ball really well in the first half of the season, certainly tailed off as the year went on. But if I'm Jalen Smith, I can see opportunities to make some more money and also have a more clear shot to maintaining playing time, not have to be in this constant back and forth that he and Isaiah Jackson have been over the last 2 years. And Obi is really a coin flip for me. I think there's just a number that you can't go over as far as what everybody else is going to offer him. I think they'd like to keep him, basically that he just fits in really well with what they do, just having that guy that can get up and down that floor, just to be that effective of a rim runner. If you're going to be that much of a transition team, just knowing that basically anytime the ball gets in his hands when he's getting down the court, he's going to finish it, and he's going to create a lot of opportunities just by outrunning guys. There's just a lot of points there that you don't necessarily get from somebody else. I think he obviously scores a good bit, but it's just knowing that you have a guy coming off the bench that you can just throw it ahead to when you really want to run is a really nice luxury to have. And so I think he's happy. Just what with the role he's got, even though he wasn't starting toward the end of the year, even if he doesn't get that back, obviously with Siakam being the guy at the 4 now, if you're Obi Toppin, you see a lot of opportunity to just continue to be, sort of happy, satisfied. So I think that it's a good match for them, but you obviously see scenarios where, people need to go out and get somebody, and sometimes you almost have to overpay. Last year the Pacers had to overpay to get Bruce Brown just to get to the salary floor. Somebody had to get that money, so Bruce Brown got it. And there could be other teams in that situation where, they just have money that they even need to throw at somebody like an Obi Toppin. So, they just can't be throwing. They can't, if it gets to, somewhere in the 20 million range, that's just too much. So if they can keep it somewhere 10 to 12, somewhere around the mid-level, that would certainly be something for them. So I just really think Obi's a coin flip, and it really depends on how the rest of the market looks.
Dustin, last one for me. Appreciate your time because, again, I know it's going to be a long night for you. Dustin Appirat covers the Pacers for the Indianapolis Star. I guess it's a bit hypothetical. 19th overall pick, the Pacers obviously sent to Toronto, part of that package for Pascal Siakam. Had they had that selection, that's very much in like the Zach Edey range. Do you think the Pacers would have had any interest in Edey? There's a side of me that says, hell no, that's not the style they play. But then there's another part of it that's like, when you get to the second unit, if you can kind of throw just a weird curveball at another team, maybe at times you can dictate a little bit to them. And, rebounding certainly is an issue for this team, and obviously he would help in that area. How do you think, a hypothetical Edey to the Pacers would have looked, or would there have been no interest?
I lean no, just because, I just feel like they need 5 guys who can run. Now, I do think that Rick Carlisle is certainly making a push for saying, we've got to put more emphasis on things like defense and rebounding in particular, and saying, and so there's a non-zero possibility that he would say, hey, look, we've got to be able to run, and shoot, if we're going to go in transition, if he just gets the ball, he doesn't even have to get back. We'll get down there for him and we'll score, and we don't even necessarily need the 5 guy to make it down the floor. But I think it's just I lean no, because I think they would think, we can get a guy who can rebound and run, and that's the way that we have to be, because you've got to be able to play. The point is to be able to spread the floor, and if you're not going to be able to, score on that first break, and basically that you have, you want to have your 5 guys down there and still have this floor spread out, and being able to get a trail 3 and stuff like that, and be able to get a guy who can, just really be damaging on a pick and roll, be able to pick and pop. Certainly I think they like what they have out of Miles Turner and his ability to, shoot from outside, and shoot and create in the mid range and score at the rim. I think they like what they have there, and they like guys who fit that mold. They like having Jackson, who's a great lob threat that you can kind of just fling the ball up in the air and he can throw throw it down. I think they like having guys like that. They wouldn't. I mean, I don't think that they would, completely dismiss it out of hand. And they probably would have brought him in just because they tend to do that when it comes to, IU and Purdue guys, just giving them a shot and letting them come to, Gainbridge and get a workout and basically have a day where they get, they're the center of the media attention. They like doing that, I think, in that part of the year. But I would lean that they ultimately wouldn't make that pick just because I just think they just move too fast at the end of the day. And I think there's enough teams that play at a slower pace that he can fit into more easily.
Dustin DePirak from the Indianapolis Star. He'll have all your coverage here in what could be a slow night tonight, but a busy early evening for him tomorrow. Dustin, as always, man, thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
That's Dustin DePirak from the Star.
One quick thing we haven't talked about. We got a second here before the check down that we haven't talked about. Late last night, and I'm not going to read it because it is so confusing with the picks being shipped all over the place. But the Rockets and Nets made a deal in pick swaps and everything else where there is a belief now that, whether it be today or tomorrow, sooner rather than later, that the Houston Rockets are arming themselves to go after Kevin Durant. And, of course, if you're the Phoenix, boy, that blew up in your face this season. You're going to be way over the cap. You have no flexibility. I don't know what their pick situation is, but I'm sure it's not great after getting Bradley Beal and Kevin Durant, and obviously they had Devin Booker there. That's the other thing I would say right now that's being watched in NBA circles is what do the Houston Rockets do, and could Kevin Durant potentially be on the move? And this would be his fourth team or fifth team? Kevin Durant. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. So that's a possibility.
Fifth, right?
Yeah,
Thunder,
I think fifth.
Warriors, Nets, Suns.
Yeah, and
Rockets.
then potentially another team. So the Houston Rockets, out of nowhere, they have picks. They have some young players. They have the third overall pick. Would they potentially make a move and want Kevin Durant? I don't know. It's interesting. Maybe in the next 10 hours we get some sort of clarity on that.
Well, let's lead off the morning checkdown with the other big news item. For those that missed it last night, quite the blockbuster involving certainly one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. Let's hit a morning checkdown.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
Yeah, like you mentioned, KB, let's start there. It doesn't happen all the time that the Nets and the Knicks are going to do business together, but that's what we saw Mikal Bridges going to the Knicks last night. If you're just waking up, probably happened at about 10 o'clock or so last night. Now, it's a haul that the Nets do get. The Nets get unprotected, 4 of them, unprotected first-rounders from the Knicks. 2025, 27, 29, and then in 2031, they also get a protected 2025 first-rounder via the Milwaukee Bucks. There's some second-round pick swaps as well. So it's an absolute haul for Bridges, who, of course, joins not only his Villanova teammates, that adds yet another wing 3-and-D guy to the Knicks, average about 20 points a game, and he plays. He plays 82 games a year. I think it's something like 474 straight games that Mikal Bridges has played in. So, Tom Thibodeau loves that. Then the Nets are in complete rebuild mode now, armed with just next year in a draft that's supposed to be much better, 4 first-round picks, including their own.
It is quite the chips to the middle of the table move by the Knicks. I think it's a wonderful move, honestly, for New York. And again, for those that missed the reporting from Adrian Wojnarowski, the indication is they still feel like they have got the room to re-sign OG Anunoby, who declined his player option, as Dustin alluded to, which was the expectation, and he's going to sign a massive deal. I mean, if you're looking at some Knicks starting lineup, we'll see what they do at center, because it sounds like Isaiah Hartenstein could be a casualty off of this. But again, you're talking Brunson, you're talking Bridges, you're talking Anunoby, obviously the return of a 3-time All-Star and Julius Randle. That's a pretty good 1 through 4.
It is.
Whatever they do the 5. And you got Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo coming off the bench.
It's a solid team, man.
I am very impressed on paper what that looks like. And again, I don't view this as a, hey, do you have enough ball to go around? Or, I think the Villanova connection is kind of real, to be honest with you. So, I would look at New York right now and probably slot them in as a very clear number 2 in the Eastern Conference. And then I think you would group the Pacers in that Milwaukee, Philly, Miami, Cleveland, whoever else you would throw onto that next tier. But I'm just curious, what does this mean? What does this mean for the Pacers? Does this, bolster the idea of, hey, we need to listen to more calls? Or is the Pacers going to say, no, we're not going to let other teams and their moves impact us. We're going to stick with our original plan if that indeed is run it back. And then I think the other thing, Andy, is as you look at tonight, does this open up the Knicks to draft a center? And is that Zach Edey or Khalil Ware? They are drafting 24 and 25 in round one. They also have a pick in the 30s. Edey, you would think stylistically, would fit them a little bit more. But, certainly if they're not drafted until 24 or 25, Edey could be gone. And maybe Ware is the more likely option. So I think that's an interesting subplot to this storyline.
Yeah. Can I ask you something? I know it's a check down, so, we'll get you scores and everything else. Do you think Mike Woodson has done enough to publicize he's going to have a first-round pick in Khalil Ware? I doing radio where I follow John Calipari, this was very much Calipari's Christmas Day, is getting his mug in front of NBA guys and getting his guys drafted into the NBA. And Rob Dillingham and Reed Shepherd, I actually think a name to watch, Antonio Reeves, later on in the 50s for even the Pacers. That guy can shoot at an NBA level, has an NBA body. I'm just asking you. I mean, we've talked about Zach Edey. Khalil Ware is going to be a first-rounder coming from Indiana, and Khalil Ware was nothing at Oregon and goes to Mike Woodson. I mean, to me, you're looking at positives, feather in the cap. I know they didn't have a good year, but I don't know. It feels like locally, Khalil Ware's almost got lost in the shuffle, and this is a guy that very well could be a top 20, top 25 pick.
I think part of it has to do with the one and done. He's only in Bloomington for 1 year. Obviously, the team success wasn't there. I think Mike Woodson, that staff, deserves credit. I think without, Khalil Ware, probably Umar Ballo maybe isn't as, viewing Indiana as a school that he would attend. Sure. Certainly the NIL helps out. But it sounds like right now Mike Woodson has some Hoosier hysteric issues to deal with.
We got to talk about that. Maybe not today. I listened to the Hoosier Hysteric podcast yesterday. I was doing a little treadmill action yesterday.
Were you crying or laughing?
Oh, I was laughing. I was laughing.
Woodson or at the hysterics or both?
More at Woodson. Whenever a coach attacks fans that love the school, it always goes wrong. Calipari did it at Kentucky. Kenny Payne did it when I followed him at U of L. And good God, Mike Woodson, who feels like he's got more power than anybody.
Was he pointing at Scott Dolson saying, I'll be the coach as long as I want to be the coach here?
That's what the Hoosier Hysterics
That's what the Hysterics said
which is
in the meeting?
Which is fantastic. And also,
what an epic listen.
Not the thing you want to hear if you're an Indiana fan.
Just one final note on the OG Anunoby front. JG tweets a picture of Tyrese Halliburton talking to Anunoby on the court with Pascal Siakam. By all accounts, the Pacers do not have the funds to acquire one OG Anunoby given their cap situation. All right, baseball-wise, everybody lost that matters. Indians lost as well. The Colts will announce training camp schedule later tonight, so we'll give you those dates coming up. And again, round one of the NBA draft starts at 8 o'clock tonight. 5 minutes for these picks. Round two will be tomorrow. Those picks will last 4 minutes, and as of right now, the Pacers pick 36, 49, and 50. All of those, of course, in round two.
Yeah, coverage tonight on ESPN Radio at 7 o'clock. We'll have it right here on The Fan. All right, let's take a break. On the other side, we'll begin looking at this coming season as it pertains to the AFC South. What about the Jacksonville Jaguars? Yeah, what about them? John Shipley from The Athletic. He joins us next. Wake up call here on this Wednesday, 93.5.
Up top. Heck yeah!
Dave's company just got the first ever 5-year price lock guarantee from Comcast.
refresher. The Jacksonville Jaguars.
In the summertime when the weather is high, you can stretch right up
All right.
and touch the sky.
Each of the next couple weeks here on the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy, we'll get an AFC South refresher. And right now we head down to the land of Jacksonville. John Shipley, SI.com, going to join us here. And boy, it sounds like quite the news. Nothing like the late June news for the Jags yesterday revolving their stadium. And I know certainly we've been curious about it up here. Just what about the London thing? Is that ever going to be a possibility? Sounds like that is definitely not going to happen with yesterday's news. And again, John joins us right now. John, for our audience that missed it, could you fill us in on the news item regarding Everbank Stadium and what that's going to look like here for the next handful of years?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the really timeline for the Jack Stadium is for the next 2 seasons, 2024, 2025. They're going to be able to play games in there as is. Construction will happen during the off season. They'll be able to have regular capacity. So nothing will really change for teams visiting them like the Colts will, for the next 2 years. In 2026, they'll play again at Everbank, but the stadium capacity will be about 43,500. So, almost cut in half from, what their normal stadium would typically hold. And in 2027, it looks like they're either going to play in Orlando at Camping World Stadium or at the Florida Gators Stadium in Gainesville. So they'll definitely won't be playing in Jacksonville in 2027. They even mentioned they can potentially play up to 3 games in London, whether those are home games or not, in 2027. But one way or another, they will not be playing in Jacksonville that year. And then 2028, they'll have their new stadium.
Well, John, I think the most important question is, are they keeping the pool where the guys in the cargo shorts all sit during the game? Are they keeping the pool? Do you have any idea?
I honestly don't, but I don't see how you can get rid of it. Yeah, it's a safe.
Exactly. I don't think you can. John Shipley with us. We're talking Jags as we get ready for the AFC South in the football season. He's from SI, and he joins us on the Payless Liquors hotline. All right, so, last year, John, I was vocal that I did not believe in Jacksonville, and they were a sexy pick to not only win the South, go to the playoffs, and maybe even be, contending for the Super Bowl in that AFC championship game. What happened last year, and what's going to be different this year that people should buy into the Jacksonville Jaguars getting back to the postseason?
Yeah, no, I mean, last year is really, a tale of two halves. During the first 11 games of the season, they start off 8-3. Their defense had, really ranked highly, and not only, some of the basic metrics, yards against, points against, et cetera, but some of the advanced metrics too, and they were also leading in turnovers. But there was always the worry that, when a turnover stopped, what would happen to the defense? And that ultimately happened, over the last 2 months of the season. Turnovers dried up, and, it reflected in the defense taking a deep dive. Otherwise, they also had injuries. Trevor Lawrence dealt with 4 different injuries last year, including 3 in the final 6 weeks of the season. And he clearly wasn't playing, near 100%. On top of that, they lost Christian Kirk for the final 5 games. Left tackle Cam Robinson was in and out of the lineup. Walker Little, Ezra Cleveland, 2 linemen who they, had spent in significant investments on were in and out of the lineup with injuries. They also had their top cornerback, Tyson Campbell, dealing with injuries. But there were also issues that, had showed up in the past for the Jaguars that were avoidable that they didn't address. They made a misstep with, handing the offense over to offensive coordinator Press Taylor as opposed to Doug Peterson. Some of their signings from past seasons, Foley Fatukasi, now with the Houston Texans, namely, didn't exactly work out. And an offensive line who, I believe somebody with ESPN, I believe it was Mike Clay, had ranked the Jaguars offensive line like 31st last offseason. And the Jaguars had literally printed shirts and wore them in training camp, saying 31st offensive line and touting it. And the offensive line ended up ranking, around that low. So it kind of showed the overconfidence that they had heading into the season. So all of that mixed together, injuries and areas that they didn't really address that they should have.
Yeah, you kind of forget 8-3 start. They were battling for the 1 seed there and then lost 5 of 6. It did seem like, those injuries that John mentioned, that Christian Kirk one especially, really turned things for Jacksonville. John Shipley, again, covers the Jags for SI.com. He's with us here on the Payless Liquors hotline. John, draft-wise, I know a lot of Colts fans were very interested. I think Andy might have been high on him as well. Brian Thomas out of LSU, the wideout. That's who Jacksonville took in round 1. I think traded back just a hair. Calvin Ridley, of course, gone. How do you see the rookie from LSU fitting in? Because, again, I think a lot of Colts fans had some curiosity in him.
Yeah, I think he'll definitely have a defined role, in his rookie season. I don't think he's going to, be one of their leading targets or anything like that. I think Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram are going to see the, bulk of targets, and then even Gabe Davis, I think, could outdraw Thomas in targets. So he's potentially going to be fourth on the team in targets. But I do think the targets he does get, design deep shots, trying to use them vertically. That speed has shown up, throughout the offseason. And, wide receiver coach Chad Hall has even said, basically their advice to him is try to let Trevor Lawrence overthrow you and, see if he actually can. So that seems like what their approach to him this season is. The hope is that he can eventually grow into that wide receiver, number one type of role, as he gets older, as he gets more experience, because he's obviously going to be seeing a lot of different things in the NFL than he saw at LSU, even in the SEC. So I think he'll have a defined role, and he's definitely, right now he's the only rookie who's really guaranteed to start out of their entire class. But I also think inside of that role, he's going to be behind, some veterans who are in place to get more targets.
John Shipley with us from SI.com. We're talking some Jaguar football here on this Wednesday on the Payless Liquors hotline. I have a love-hate relationship with Trevor Lawrence. I think he's good. I don't know if he's great. He's now paid, like a Mahomes or a Josh Allen or whatever it may be. Did you, and I assume you did, I assume the majority or maybe even all of Jaguar fans are happy at the massive contract extension that Lawrence got. And I would imagine as well, just 24 years old, John, that they feel like the best football he's going to play is going to be in front of him. How can Trevor Lawrence be better the next couple years after signing that massive deal?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a projection because his on-field production, no matter which way you slice it, no matter what kind of context you put it in, obviously doesn't match that level of contract. I do think when you're looking at quarterback contracts moving forward and just the percentage of salary cap, it's maybe not as big of a deal as it looks, right away. It's a deal that I think could potentially age well if he becomes what they hope he can become. But he still has to actually do that. And to do that, he has to, really another big reason that, they lost in that final game against the Tennessee Titans last year and missed the playoffs was Lawrence took things into his own hands, too much. And that was a really kind of something that was a repeating issue throughout the season. A lot of his fumbles were plays that he was trying to extend that, he really just harmed the team by trying to do too much, not taking care of the football. Turnovers have been a problem for him throughout 3 years because of that issue. He plays a much more, I think, risky and dangerous style of football than I think people probably expected coming out of Clemson. People talked him up as like a Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck level, prospect. Whereas, obviously each of those guys had some risky, natures to himself as well. But Lawrence definitely has that also. So I think just cutting down the turnovers, situational awareness is the biggest things he has to do to actually become what the Jaguars are paying him to be.
And John Shipley, SI.com, where you can find his work, covers the Jags. John, great stuff. Would love to have you on this fall when the Colts and Jags meet a couple times.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be there.
Appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Yep.
Again, that's John Shipley right there, Payless Liquors hotline. I know on the Lawrence front, paying quarterbacks the amount of money that obviously Jacksonville just did. I know that's a topic you want to get to on the other side. Chris Ballard actually had a comment.
He said the exact same thing that we were talking about last week. He really did.
Ballard had an interesting comment in regards to that. We'll play that audio here on the other side. But I am reminded, too, with Jacksonville. Again, I've probably always been a little bit more pro-Jacksonville than most. Last year they're 8-3, and then all of a sudden Kirk gets hurt. Lawrence is banged up, as John alluded to, and the bottom falls out. Colts, Jags, Week 18 this year. I think that could be another win and get in.
Oh, it's going to mean something.
Like that,
There's no doubt about it. Right.
The Colts have this weird AFC South schedule this year. It's so front-loaded. You
play Houston twice in the first, 9 weeks?
Right. You got Houston in Week 1. You play Houston twice before Halloween. You have all your road AFC South games done before Halloween. But Jacksonville comes to Lucas Oil Stadium Week 18. Obviously, last year you started with them in that opener at Lucas Oil. That game, to me, last year we had it. All the AFC South games mattered in Week 18. That could be a huge – if you think Houston's going to win the division – that right there could be very well for a wild card spot.
Yeah, part of me wants that to happen because that means the Colts are in it to the end. The other thing is I want them to be in so that doesn't happen because if back-to-back years you lost in playoff spot
in your own building?
To the Jags and Texans in back-to-back years, that would not be good. You mentioned that Ballard sound. We'll do it on the other end. Our Colts question of the day. We'll keep it going on this Wednesday, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
Summer weather is finally here. And
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
Lindon going to join us in 10 minutes. We'll give a pair of tickets away for their July 6th contest. That's their next home game. They're out west. They're starting tomorrow night. I think that's one of those WTHR sister station games. Amazon Prime as well, but for our local audience, let's not consume that. That's where you can find the Fever.
Don't forget, we've got tickets for the pop quiz too.
Yes, Jelly Roll.
Jelly Roll, how about that?
Yeah. So that's
pair of
for
tickets the rest of the week.
Our hip hop, rap, country fans, right? Checking all those boxes with Jelly Roll.
Is there hip hop? I don't know. The songs I've heard of Jelly Roll, I haven't heard hip hop in there.
Well, yeah, maybe some of the older Jelly Roll action there. So that is going to be the pop quiz here coming up a little bit later today. Our Colts question of the day is in regards to an audio clip from Chris Ballard yesterday, or I guess whenever he recorded that podcast with Michael Lombardi that you found pretty interesting, right?
Yeah, I did. It's about a minute long. Before we play that
question of the day.
Yeah, I was about to say.
I don't have a sounder, so I have to do it myself.
We have no sounder because Mark has different drives of his computer that are not working today, but he's been told that they're working on it.
Literally.
So at some point, he'll
it's
be
like
good
they're working
to go.
on the arm of the garage to get my car in there.
I thought my issue was the biggest issue of the three of us
Well,
this morning,
it's not.
that I have no sound that I can access, but you have obviously the bigger issue, Kevin.
Yeah, KB got towed earlier today.
He had to one-up me.
Yeah, there's $175. Anyway, you better have cash. Anyway, so here's Chris Ballard. He was asked by Michael Lombardi on the podcast, the GM Shuffle. He asked Ballard, now we are way far away from this, but he asked him about extending quarterbacks, and obviously you hope here in a couple years you have that on the plate of Chris Ballard or whoever the GM is, and that is extending Anthony Richardson at quarterback. Here's what Ballard had to say.
If you know he's a great player, I promise you, whatever you pay him, he's going to play great and it's going to be worth it. I think one of the hardest things in terms of making that evaluation is you've got one and he's a good player, but he's not a special player, and he's wanting special player money. And that's where the struggle comes. And so if you know you've got a great player, you're going to budget correctly in 2 or 3 years in advance to make sure you have the flexibility to be able to get him under contract. The real struggle comes with the decision that if he's good, but he's not special, all right, then how do you bridge that gap? Because none of them, they all want to set the bar, to be the highest paid, no matter where they rank in the equation. And then they play upon your desperation. That's the hardest dilemma, I think, for teams. It's not necessarily paying him the big money. It's making the right evaluation on, is he really the difference maker that you're going to win a Super Bowl with?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think it's frankly, a very candid comment from Chris Ballard. I'd be curious, how some quarterbacks maybe would view.
No kidding.
that thought. And you, I know, are in full agreement on that comment. He started that answer saying something that I found more interesting. I guess this is kind of where the question of the day comes for me of, are they going to do anything at safety? And I know that's spinning off that answer. But, Andy, he began the answer to that question saying you never overpay for a great player. And that really struck me of that to me, and that to me I think is so much of his core about how he operates from a financial standpoint when it comes to free agency. And I bring that up to say, is that kind of his thought process at safety right now?
It's a good question.
Justin Simmons.
Right.
Quandre Diggs.
Right.
Jamal Adams. And, Jamal Adams I think has fallen off a bit. But, those first two guys, you never overpay for a great player. I think at times, more often than not, he views the market of free agency as, nope, I don't believe in it. I just, I don't believe in it. I don't believe in paying, whatever, A money to B players, B money to C players, et cetera, et cetera. And that quote, never overpaying for a good player. Is he thinking that at safety right now? Whereas,
it's a good question. Yeah.
It's not as much as he is incredibly steadfast in the future of Nick Cross or Rodney Thomas or, whoever, but it's more of the, nope, I don't believe in overpaying in free agency, so I'm going to bite the bullet and roll with what we've got.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question then to go a step further would be, is it always just black or white with that? And I think, in other words, sometimes you overpay for a good player because if you don't have a good player, what else is on your roster? And I think isn't that what scares us at the safety position? Is that right now we don't know if Nick Cross is a good player. Right? I mean, we don't know that. I think he could be a fine player.
Well, so far he has not been.
But he has not been.
Through 2 years, he's been benched on multiple occasions, and he started 4 games in 2 years at a position where you have started a 7th-round pick.
Sure.
You started a guy that used to play linebacker for you, and Ronnie Harrison Jr. So right now, he has not been that. And, you drafted him at 20 whatever years old he was, very young. Does he, reach that level here in year 3?
Yeah, it's a good question on the safety front. As for the quarterback, boy, I guess some people could say, they might use Ballard's words against him, but I think Ballard actually, out of all the things since I've worked here, KB, that maybe Ballard has said or done, I feel like that quote about quarterbacks is spot on. If you look at, they absolutely play on the desperation of teams. Kirk Cousins has lived in that world, whether it now be Atlanta, definitely with Minnesota guys. I mean, he most definitely played on their desperation, but I don't know. I mean, you look at the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL, Jared Goff, while a good player, okay, and probably a good solid player for the Lions, he's making more than Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. So, you have Jared Goff. I contend Trevor Lawrence right now is highest paid quarterback in the NFL. Kyler Murray, Deshaun Watson, and Kirk Cousins. You have half of the top. That's 5 guys right there in my estimation. You have half of the top 10 highest paid quarterbacks in the NFL are not special talents. I mean, they're just not. Again, Trevor Lawrence is 24. Maybe he becomes that. He also had 16 turnovers last year, and I know he played through injuries and there, Christian Kirk, and I know there's a bunch of reasons, but I find it to be spot on. And then it goes to, do we think that Anthony Richardson will be in that situation in a couple years? Will it be clear that AR gets injured, you're not going to sign him to a huge deal? Will it be clear the other way? This kid's special. He's a unicorn. He's an alien. Absolutely, you're going to pay him one of these massive top, dollars in the NFL. Or will it be somewhere in between where you feel like if we get rid of him, where else are we going to go? But you also don't really have the confidence that you're going to win the Super Bowl with him. I tend to think the latter is not going to happen. But over the next couple years, that's the big question. We'll find out what's the case with Anthony Richardson.
Well, I think it also gets back to this. If you're going to suck, really suck.
Man, you're right on that.
Easy.
Yeah.
Now.
I mean, look at Mark's Bears. I mean, they're the poster child of it right now of, if we're bailing on Justin Fields, you better have the number 1 overall pick. I have no issue with what Jacksonville gave Trevor Lawrence. Sure, is there an element sitting there of like, what else were they going to do?
Right.
Yes. And I know, again, that's not a ringing endorsement. But at the same time, I feel like there's been enough with Lawrence. It's like, okay, I can see some stuff there. You draft him 1 overall. You're a little bit pot committed. Yes, I think you do, extend him and move on. And I do think there's some context around that where he had just a horrific start to his NFL career. And I think so much of that had to do with Urban Meyer and that dysfunction around him. And now you're trying to get him on a little bit more stable ground. But, again, a month away from the start of training camp, part of me goes back to that early comment from Ballard too of, you never overpay for good players. And sometimes I think in free agency, you got to put your ego to the side.
You have to.
And if
you might have
want to try and improve your roster, not like, maybe change it to all of a sudden you're a Super Bowl team, but improve some position groups. Sitting on 27 million of cap space isn't going to do a whole lot for you on that end.
All right, so that's our Colts question of the day. We'll take a break. Coming up on the other end. Now what for the Indiana Fever after the loss on Sunday? Back in action tomorrow night. Their general manager, Lynn Dunn, she joins us on the other side on this Wednesday on The Fan.
Attention, we have some delightful news. It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5. The Fan.
All right, we'll address a little soap opera in Bloomington here coming up in about 15 minutes. And at the tail end of this current interview with the one and only Lynn Dunn, we'll continue to give away our Fever tickets like we've done with Coach Dunn here each of the last couple of weeks. A pair of tickets to their game with the Liberty coming up on July 6th. But now let's turn our attention to the Payless Liquors hotline. And she is the president, the GM of the Indiana Fever. She is Lynn Dunn. Coach, good morning. 4-1 over the 5-game stretch that I think you labeled with us as very, very important. Overall thoughts to, I think, what you would take as 4-1, but probably a little bit of a sour end to that.
Well, we're happy that we're on a little bit of a winning trek here. You know, we had such a tough schedule early, and then we had a break, and then we started playing some of the teams that are in the lower half where we are. And I think we've had some really great games. We've seen some improvement offensively. We're currently about 6th in the league in scoring. We're every game we've won, we've had 4 people in double figures. We've seen Mitchell and Smith and Boston continue to get better. So we've positioned ourselves today a half game out of that 8th spot, which is the spot we're after to get into the playoffs. And we're certainly ahead of where we were this time last year. So I'm seeing a lot of progress.
Coach, am I allowed to call the Chicago Sky the rival of the Fever?
Sure. They're right down the road. Why wouldn't they be? Heck yeah. And they're young and they're rebuilding just like we are. So it's a great rivalry.
I mean, all eyes are on this rivalry, Coach. I mean, you guys see that, do you not? I mean, you saw it a couple Sundays ago, and then the ratings sure showed
over 2 million.
Yeah,
right?
the ratings showed that this past Sunday, everyone was watching the battle there. I mean, you have to.
Well, I think the TV ratings just blew up when the Fever and the Sky play. But you know, you've got to understand, we've got 2 rookies there. Well, actually 3: Cordosa and Reese in Chicago, who just came from the college ranks, and then of course Caitlin Clark for us.
Sure.
And those 3 battled all through college. You know, they're all in the Final Four every year, playing for national championships. So their fans have followed them on to the WNBA, and so it's just a great time for the WNBA.
You know, we've asked you this, and so much it has been made of the crowds that you guys have experienced. And then, of course, you mentioned the TV ratings. The Fever and Caitlin Clark are setting all the records in the WNBA right now as pertains to that. You know, 20, 23-year-old records are falling because of you all. At this point of the season, is it still surprising at all that every arena you guys walk into is seemingly sold out and every game that's on national TV is setting a record? I think the Fever, you guys have set like 3 different records already this season.
Well, I think initially it was surprising, and I think now we're starting to expect to go into an arena and it be sold out. And you know, and kudos to the fans of Caitlin Clark, of Aaliyah Boston, you know, of Angel Reese and Camila Cordosa. These fans have followed the women's college game right into the WNBA, and we're happy to have them.
Again, Lynn Dunn is with us here, of course, the Fever GM, and she is with us on the Payless Liquors hotline. Coach, yesterday you guys waived Celeste Taylor, 2nd-round pick, I think 15th overall. Like, when I see a roster move like that, it's stunning to me because, you know, whether it's the NBA or the NFL, you just don't see, like, teams, whatever, bail, cut a player of that stature from a draft pick standpoint. I get the WNBA is different in a 12-team league, so I guess I'll start here. Why did you waive her? And then could you maybe enlighten our audience a little bit more on why at times you do see higher draft picks get cut a little bit earlier in their careers than other leagues?
Well, folks don't really understand that we were in a unique situation. You can only have a 12-person roster. Dantas, who we signed in free agency, who is a veteran WNBA post player on the Brazilian national team, she was hurt coming into camp. So we were able to suspend her and carry an extra player these first 6 weeks. We knew there was going to come a time mid-season around in this time where someone on our team would have to go. We could only carry 12 players. So it wasn't a situation where, hey, guys, she's not playing well. She's not good enough. It was just, hey, we've got a crunch here where we've got Danta's time. She's healthy now. We've got to reactivate her. And so we had to evaluate the current other players that we had. Celeste was the last player to join our team. We drafted her in the second round. Would love to have kept her. Wish we could keep 13 players, and we would have, and we wish her the best. But it's a tough spot. Had to do it, had to move on, and now Dantas will be activated and will join our team, as a player that's eligible to participate.
How do you balance that? I mean, you guys are in the midst of a rebuild and, a veteran post player versus, again, a second-round pick that, 15 overall. It's not like she was at the end of the draft. So, I mean, how do you balance that element of, you guys are still in a rebuild. It's a 12-person roster, but at the same time, it's the veteran here versus the, young rookie that you guys obviously invested some notable draft pick in.
Right. And we have, a young team. We've got plenty of young players. What we wanted to do was invest in some veteran players. That's why we brought Timmy Fag-Benley in and Katie Lou Samuelson and Dantas. Those were the three players that we signed in the offseason in free agency to give us some veteran leadership. So, now we have a really good balance of young players, middle, and then a couple of veterans that can give us some leadership. So it's how we rebuild.
Lynn Dunn with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Fever GM, they're back in action. West Coast trip, 10 o'clock, coming up tomorrow night. I just want to go back to the game against the Sky on Sunday. Just get your reaction. Obviously, you give up the 15-point lead, the 12-point lead there in the final 6-7 minutes or so. And then the last three possessions, a lot was made. Did Caitlin Clark get the ball enough down the stretch? And we saw this a little bit where Tyrese Halliburton, the aggressiveness of, these players are so good at passing, finding open teammates, and then at times, media guys like me and fans, they want to see, the best player take the shot at the end. How did you view the final couple possessions against Chicago on Sunday?
That's a great point, and I liked how you used Halliburton. You see him be aggressive, and he's such a great passer, but he's also a tremendous scorer. And I think at times, Caitlin, who is just a rookie, is very unselfish. I love the fact that she is trying to set up her teammates. She's trying to get them the ball. She's always looking to see who's got a better shot. And I think at times now she's learning, okay, when do I need to now be a little more selfish and take that shot and let it be for me? And I think that's just part of her growth. I give her credit for setting up all the other players. Now we have 4 players in double figures, but I think in crunch time, she may have to assert herself a little bit more and make sure she's involved in maybe a couple of those last shots.
I could not agree more on that. Frankly, I'd rather have Caitlin taking a few more challenge shots myself. Again, Lynn Dunn is with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Coach, it's upcoming the Olympic break, and I'm curious, just what are the rules on that? Obviously, you've got some teams that are sending multiple players over to the Olympics. Are you guys allowed to practice during that time? How does that work when the whole league is taking multiple weeks off, but not everybody's sending players to the Olympics?
Well, first of all, the league mandates that we give the players, I think it's 6 or 7 days immediately when the Olympic break starts. Right after the All-Star game in Phoenix, there'll be 7 or 8 days where everybody's off. You cannot practice. And then the players come back. And then you just kind of have a new mini training camp. You start over, you practice, and all of your players are back. If you've got some Olympians, then they're overseas in Paris, and you practice with what you have. So, the bad news is right now we don't have anybody on the Olympic team. So the good news is they'll all be there practicing, and it's a great time for us to get better.
Again, July 17th to August 16th. That is the break there. The Fever's last game on the 17th of July, and then nothing till August 16th with that Olympic break.
Lynn Dunn with us here on the Payless Liquors Hotline. Fever back in action tomorrow night. I just figured I would ask you this. So tonight is the men's draft. It starts tonight there in the NBA, Lynn, and a lot of the conversation probably be because there's so much of a foreign influence in this draft. a lot of people have just kind of blanket statements said, well, this is not a very good draft, right? And I'm sure you've heard that on the women's side of the WNBA. Well, maybe this draft isn't as great. Maybe next year, the year after is a much better draft. And we understand that some years it's a better crop than others. But I don't know, when general managers like yourself hear that, well, this draft isn't great, how do you take that? Because you can always get somebody who can help your roster, and obviously teams in the NBA will find that out this year. So when you hear that type of rhetoric, what goes through your mind? I'm interested.
Well, that's a great point. And let me say this. The foreign players that are coming into our league in the NBA and the WNBA are exceptional players. I mean, look at the impact the foreign players are having on both of our leagues. So let's don't downplay the value that they have. I think sometimes GMs downplay that, hoping that somebody will overlook some of those great players that are coming in, from overseas, because they're gifted, they're highly skilled, they're smart. They can score, and they surprise you with their defensive knowledge. So don't underestimate those international players. And sometimes I think GMs just say that, it's not that good of a draft, hoping that you're overlooking somebody.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, Coach, your last West Coast trip of the year. You had one earlier in the year, 1 and 2. It'll be at Seattle and then at Phoenix Sunday, at Vegas on Tuesday. What do you want to see the second time around with your team obviously playing better basketball than it was earlier this season?
Well, obviously, we're going out west to play teams that are going to be in the playoffs. There's the Storm, the Aces, and the Mercury are all in the top 6. They're very talented. They all have an Olympian on their team or two. So what we want to do is see improvement from the last time we went west to now. I think it's interesting that this will be our last West Coast trip. We haven't even come to the half mark of the season. So once again, the league's throwing us a tough schedule. Can we weather it? Can we get better? Can we grow through this tough situation? They're all very good teams. We want to go out there and compete as hard as we can.
She is the one and only Lynn Dunn. She joins us Wednesdays here on the Wake Up Call. She's hinted at our trivia question. We'll ask offline. She's done it on several occasions here in this interview. Little does she know. So, Coach, thank you for that. Congrats on the better stretch here as of late, and safe travels out west.
Hey, guys, thanks so much for how good you're covering the Fever. Appreciate it.
Thank you. That is Lynn Dunn right there, Payless Liquors Hotline. Andy Sweeney, she mentioned on several occasions the balanced scoring in the Fever wins this season. So how about 317-239-1070? Pair of tickets to the Fever and Liberty. That is a week from Saturday.
That's a big game.
That's a big matchup.
That's a good game, yeah.
1 o'clock Saturday game. Mark Dyke, I don't know how he efforted this, but maybe someone that's never been to a Fever game. How about that?
Okay.
Yeah, we got to trust.
They could easily just lie to me and just say I've never been.
We're gonna go with integrity here, unlike me trying to park my car.
Yeah.
On that end, the 4 double-digit scores for the Fever right now. You got 4 in double figures. We need all 4 of them. Mark, I need first and last names.
Okay, I was gonna ask you if you needed the full name or not.
I need the full
Fair
name.
Enough.
Mark Dyke.
These are good tickets, man.
317-239-1070 on that. Yeah, that is a big game. That's our next home game, week from Saturday.
Oh, that'd be a well. What TV is that? I mean, that'd be a well-rated game.
CBS.
Oh, that'd be a big game.
Yeah,
Saturday afternoon. Nothing up against it, but maybe some baseball. That game will rate well. It'll be a sellout in Cambridge. That'll be a good one.
Yeah, they'll go Prime Video tomorrow night. We mentioned the sister station WTHR on that. Then they'll go ESPN, CBS. Their next 3.
Before our morning check down, we'll get to a pop quiz here shortly as well. Do you want to do the Hoosier hysterics story right now, KB?
I think we should.
You want to do it right here? I think we plan to.
It needs a lot of background on it. Now, I know Mark is fielding a few questions or a few callers here, so maybe we get through the answer to the Lynn Dunn trivia-related question, because the Hoosier hysterics and the Mike Woodson feud, which I'm glad you're laughing, because I think either if you're an IU fan, you want to cry or laugh at the same time.
Yeah.
It needs a lot of context and explaining around
and I'll probably need your help. So Mark is on. He's at least on like the 3rd call right now. He's having full conversations with people. Come on, people.
Mark,
239-1070.
I think we can cut it off after the last one. Yeah, I'd like to bring the person on air here. I mean, hell, it takes just a simple Googling of the call here. to get the 4 players in double figures. Mark, do we have a caller ready?
We're in the process of getting the question answered.
It's never a good sign, right?
I don't know. Mark's been on the phone with the guys on the phone with for over a minute right now. So, like, you call, you give the 4 names. That takes how long? 10
Mark,
seconds?
I thought we were going to do the answers on air.
Oh, well, I don't know if we talked about that, did we? I don't know. Yeah,
I thought we did that last week. What was the last question we had?
Oh, yeah, but it was just one name. It wasn't 4 names, if I'm not mistaken.
Name the teams that the Fever beat onto their title run in 2012.
Oh, you know what? It was 4 teams. Yes,
yeah,
you're exactly right.
3 teams.
Yeah, 3 teams. Excuse me. That's exactly right. So I don't have confidence that we're going to get this individual on the air looking at Mark Dighton right now. Do you just want to pivot to Hoosier Hysterics?
Okay, provide our Hoosier Hysterics context here.
I need you guys to help here. So I want to be clear. You know, in my old job, I followed IU, but they were very much, they were third probably to Kentucky and Louisville. But, living in the state and obviously, I have a love-hate relationship with IU basketball. I respect the hell out of it, but, they don't win nearly enough. And their fans, have kind of had dirt kicked on them. Do we have a winner,
yes,
Mark?
we
Go
have
ahead.
a winner.
Sorry.
Shane got the answer.
Good job, Shane.
Congratulations. We had people name 3 of 4, and then they would get stuck, and I'd say, sorry.
Do we believe that Shane's never been to a Fever game?
I don't know, but he was like caller 10, so... Once
Mark threw that away and said, I just want a winner. Damn it, I just need a winner.
Yeah, I needed somebody.
Shane could be a season ticket holder. He's going to flip the tickets at this point.
They could claim that they've never been to a game. I can't prove any of this, so
well,
I'm just going on honesty.
Shane, congrats on that. The 4, Caitlin Clark, Leah Boston, Kelsey Mitchell, and Alyssa Smith. Those would be your 4 in double figures for the Fever.
All right, so... Do you want me to do this, and you just help me along
the
way? Okay?
I will try to fill in any gaps, but yes, explain. Honestly, I think this kind of fits your prior history because I feel like at Louisville and Kentucky, you've got psycho elements of the fan base.
This is right up my alley.
That's where this story lies.
Okay, so yesterday, it's Eric Pankowski, I believe is how you say his name, and Ward Roberts. They do the Hoosier Hysterics podcast, whether you like them or not, and I saw them being crushed by other IU fans. I know there's a huge segment that loves their podcast and the events that they have put on, and with everything else, there are haters. And by the way, hate listening is still listening, and we love hate listening, to some extent here.
That's our highest market.
Yeah,
actually.
I mean, I'm sure they do. So they're obviously very popular podcasts, very popular people there with influence, if you will, with Indiana basketball. Now, I didn't totally know this, but they've been and continue to be associated very closely with IU. They've done an annual fan fest, golf outing, fantasy camp, and by the way, they said during yesterday's podcast they're still doing things with the volleyball team and the women's basketball team, and I know they run an NIL collective as well. So I mean, these are active, passionate IU fans. I don't need to tell you guys, there's a bunch of passionate IU fans, and so Eric Pankowski lives in LA, and he was summoned within the last couple months. I believe it was in mid-May. He was summoned to Bloomington from LA, which is just awesome.
This might be my favorite part.
He was just summoned.
It's a hell of a flight.
Yeah, why don't you we need to meet up. Well, what's it about when Woody wouldn't tell him, okay? So obviously, when you're summoned by a coach and athletic department, you're going to be ribbed. Do you remember, just as a sidebar, do you remember Tom Jurich, who used to be the athletic director at U of L?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
He got ran out of there the same time that Rick Pitino did. He was infamous on this, calling media, specifically radio guys, in and just MFing them. I mean, he was, so, it does happen. So anyway, as the story goes, Mike Woodson has been very unhappy, and I don't know why they brought this up in mid-May. I don't know why Woody did it there, about the critical nature, especially when they lost, 10 out of 14 games in the middle of the season, KB, and it nuked their entire year. When they did that, the Hoosier Hysterics podcast, and by the way, along with everyone in the basketball world, was critical of IU, was critical of the job that Mike Woodson did. And so Woody, unhappy about that, unhappy as well that apparently in February, I mean, it's all the way back in February, they had Brian Evans on, the former player, who you hear Brian Evans was on several times with JMV. And by the way, Mike Woodson knowing what Brian Evans said on the podcast and on with JMV is something I love. Coaches act like they don't hear. They hear everything, or they act like they do, and they just take someone's word for it, an SID or whoever it may be, their word for it. So Mike Woodson, Scott Dolson, and Eric, one of the hosts here, Eric Pankowski of Hoosier Hysterics. So they call Eric in, apparently, as the story goes, and Woody ripped him. And Woody said, me and my players and my program, we're not going to have anything to do with your fan fest or any of these other things. And, I would imagine there's an NIL component here that the players do benefit from it. And so I found, if you want to add more to the story, Woody unhappy that they were critical of the program and of the job he did. I think on the flip side, they told the stories. Mike Woodson had kind of let them into his world a little bit. They had, been able to view practice and watch practice, and he had spent some time, kind of, alone time with them. But, they were definitely, media member-wise, if you want to say that, a part of the program. And so that the Woodson was done, and that Woodson, kind of was threatening, talking close to them. One of the things that Eric says, basically that with Scott Dolson sitting there, Mike Woodson said
this is my favorite part,
that he was going to that he's going to be the coach at Indiana until he decides to not be the coach at Indiana. And by the way,
and was he pointing at Dolson according to Pankowski?
That's what Pankowski says, and that's not crazy because multiple times, in the middle of the season, especially when they were losing, Mike Woodson was very forceful. I'm the coach, and I'm going to be the coach, even in press conference.
Who's best friends with Quinn Buckner?
Well,
I am.
Yeah, and so, it makes Scott Dolson, who apparently didn't say anything in this entire meeting that lasted about an hour, it makes Scott Dolson look incredibly weak. I think everyone already knew that Dolson was incredibly weak with the Woodson hire, that it may not have been all him. And so, there's probably more to the story. I will say this. I just have their side of the story. I am sure that we'll never hear Mike Woodson's
Woodson's not going to come on the show and tell us this?
Mike Woodson, we've reached out. It's very difficult to get Indiana people on. Matt Painter with us and JMV was on how many times this season, and it's pulling teeth with Indiana. Mike Woodson's not going to do anything. My view of this is I saw this up close, and there's two specific instances. John Calipari went to war with Kentucky sports radio over the last 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know if people know that. I'm sure Indiana fans do. KSR there in Kentucky with Matt Jones and company, that he went to war with the media, but specifically them as being, the biggest media outlet for Kentucky basketball. And I saw the same thing with a guy who was a complete lame-ass coach in Kenny Payne, that Kenny Payne went to war with prominent media members as well in the 2 years that he won like 10 games in 2 years. So there's that side that I have seen, like the losing coach book. If there's a book and I gave you the loser coach mentality, going to war with media or fan type sites or fan type media, which in college you get just a ton of. We understand that. That is very much like chapter 1 in the loser book. The second thing, and I've talked about, this will be my last thing. The second thing, and I've talked so much about this, the thing that would scare the hell out of me if I'm an IU fan is the lack of two things. The lack of power with Scott Dolson over this hire, and it seems that, all the murmurings are true. And then the entitlement from Mike Woodson. The entitlement, and I saw that specifically with Kenny Payne at U of L, that, you can't do anything to Kenny. He's a former player here. And Mike Woodson has had way more success, obviously, than Kenny Payne. But the entitlement and the thin-skinned nature, apparently, of Mike Woodson is real. And that would scare me if I'm an IU fan, because there's got to be some sort of check and balance there. And I don't know if it's there. In fact, I don't think it's there. And Mike Woodson seemingly is going to be able to call his own shot. And this year's going to be all sorts of interesting because, they need to be much higher in the Big Ten. They need to be in the tournament. And I think they need to be a second weekend tournament team if we're going to start talking about Mike Woodson being a good coach. But the battle there with the Hoosier hysterics, I know some people feel differently. They don't, there's some in the fans that may not like them and their podcast or whatever else. But I'm telling you, Woodson battling with them is out of the loser coach handbook. And the fact that he's a former NBA coach and is this thin-skinned and has this entitlement over Indiana University, those are two things that would absolutely scare me off the floor if I'm an Indiana basketball fan today. What did I miss?
What an epic story.
It's a great story.
Absolutely hilarious, sad, pathetic story on both fronts, both parties involved here. I don't want to speak for all IU fans, but I think in general it's this. The Hoosier hysterics, a bit creepy, a bit weird.
They've raised some money for NIL,
boy, do they
though,
raise
man.
a lot of money.
And by the
you
way,
know what?
They employed, I guess, Woodson's daughters for a few things as well. This is a close relationship between
Correct.
these guys and Mike Woodson.
Yeah, some sort of film-ish industry out there, and yes, they had employed one of his daughters, I think, at some point there. But yes, they have obviously raised a good amount and involved their players in many of these events that they alluded to quite often there. So I think it's one of these things where, fans of IU that, I know it's like, well, they do a lot of good. It's not my cup of tea. Like that's
Sure.
just kind of how they viewed it.
Which is fine.
Now, welcome to present day college athletics with these NIL crazed fans. They want access. They want control. They want a seat at the table. And if you don't appease them, you're going to get the airing of dirty laundry like they've gotten. The Woodson comments, it's just hilarious. To me, like, people, not a lot of people, but there's some people that have such a misconstrued opinion of what a fan should be. A fan means you're passionate, fandom. It doesn't mean that you support no matter the wins and the losses. No, you have expectations. And when they're not met, fans have the right to be upset. They have the right to criticize. Now, do you get some blurred lines when, like,
sure,
you have this sort of fan, which is, dabbling in NIL and dabbling in player access, and
some
NIL
people go
events and
too
all that.
far with threats and everything. Some people do go too far.
Well, yeah, and to be very clear,
but that's the minority.
Yeah, I would like to think and hope that they, and I think Pankowski said it yesterday several times on the podcast, like, any sort of threats, racially, death threat wise, he made it very clear. Obviously, there is absolutely zero grounds for that whatsoever. I cannot stop laughing picturing Woodson pointing at Scott Dolson, if this is indeed true, and saying, I will be the coach at Indiana for as long as I say. It is amazing to me. And look, I'm a sucker for Hollywood stories. I wish Notre Dame football would have gotten back with a Notre Dame guy. Oh, how great does that sound? That's beautiful. But because Mike Woodson played for Indiana 4 decades ago, he has this control. His NBA resume is Jim O'Brien, Mo Cheeks. That's what his NBA resume is.
And Indiana gave him the control, by the way.
We're not talking about this guy that had some wonderfully decorated NBA resume that's just like, oh my gosh, yes, college coaches are slamming down the door for him, but yet because he put on the jersey 4 decades ago, he thinks he's God down there and that he calls the shots. And, maybe it's not even Quinn Buckner. Maybe it's not even Pam Whitten. Maybe it's not even Scott Dolson. It's him that will decide his fate. That is just mind-numbing to me that Mike Woodson thinks he's got that control after the first 3 seasons that he's had so far from a head coaching standpoint. And boy, the in-athletic department drama sounds juicy. Did you see Sydney Parrish fire off her tweet yesterday?
Oh, I did not. Go ahead. Tell me. I
one of
missed
the
this.
more well-known athletes on the women's basketball team, of course, will be one of the key players for Terry Moore again this season. She mentioned on Twitter, like, hey, Ward, the other guy in the Hoosier Hysterics, and Pankowski, they've done a ton for us. And she seems very happy. And by all accounts, right, the women's basketball program will have an affiliation with some sort of fan fest event.
Fan
That's
fest.
still going to go on.
And the volleyball. And
whereas Woodson has nixed the men's program from having guys affiliated, according to them, affiliated with their events. So I love a good little in house athletic department drama between the women's and the men's program.
I'll say this, and then we'll go to a check down. You can never, and KB, I'm sure being in media have figured this out, especially with college programs. That's what I've dealt with primarily in my career. You can never pander enough to them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you raise money for the student athletes and you put on fan events and you carry the flag for a program. You can never do it enough. And I'm always intrigued on, using the Hoosier hysterics. I saw this especially on the U of L side when U of L did everything possible to crap on people who were U of L fans, but also, in the media spectrum, if you will. And I know those are blurred lines, but you can never pander enough. And then when universities and coaches and ADs and everybody else take a shot at guys, men and women who are fans and supporters of their program, I look at and say, if I'm these two guys, Hoosier hysterics, and I've been, basically banned from the men's basketball side, and then turning around next year and cheering for that company, if you will, is unbelievable. They also mentioned,
and part of that's just fandom. Fandom is wild. People wake up on Monday mornings after Colts games, and it's
they're torn up.
You think you're going to win the Super Bowl one week, and you think you're going to have the number one pick the next week. There's an element of both parties sound ridiculous. I think that is very clear.
Sure.
In this case here, but I think Mike Woodson, as the leader of the men's basketball program, has got to realize where he's at right now within the program, and that this is not something that the former player can just wash away all of the sins of the basketball team over the last few seasons. They just had, by some accounts, they just had their worst season since Tom Crean, since the end of that era, worse than any Archie Miller season. And, for him to act like it was a successful year, or that,
he's
got some clout
it's
that,
unbelievable.
He can, just say these things in front of the athletic director, if they are indeed true, is just wild to me.
Yeah.
Brad Stevens can't get to Bloomington fast enough.
Yeah, well, good luck with them. I just, last things. Eric also mentioned the podcast that, obviously the NIL is strong at IU, and there's a couple guys who, are willing to pay to get players in here for Mike Woodson. So maybe he doesn't need smaller NIL, objectives, if you will. I thought that was interesting. And then, this is just for me, for IU fans and for Mike Woodson. Mike Woodson needs to know this. When they fill up Assembly Hall or put, thousands in Assembly Hall, they did so at the end of the Tom Crean era, and they did so averaging more than, 16,000 when Archie Miller was destroying the program. So the thought process that just because fans are going to show up, that they're supporting Mike Woodson is not true. IU fans, they're a sick bunch, and I mean that in a good way, that they show up when the wins have been, the last several years have been few and far between. I said it was the last thing, and I promise it this time, and I alluded to it. I don't think Mike Woodson does a good job promoting the program. I think he does a bad job. In fact, if I had to grade Mike Woodson promoting IU basketball, you could say, well, Andy, IU basketball doesn't need it. I think he's an F at promoting the program. He should be all over Khalil Ware being a first round draft draft pick.
I think he'll be there tonight, right?
I don't know. I haven't seen Mike Woodson. Mike Woodson. Yeah,
I think you promote
when's
the
the last time
program.
he's in front of a microphone?
I think you
that
promote
sort of
the
thing.
program by showing up in the 68-team bracket and making a run.
Yeah,
that's the lack of promotion that I see.
You're probably right, but look at Matt Painter.
Yeah,
look at Matt Painter.
Sure, would I like Mike Woodson to do a few more radio interviews selfishly? Sure, but at the same time, Matt Painter is praised because of the incredible amount of success that Purdue has had. And sure, there's an element of, he's very candid in his answers, and, that stuff is enjoyable, but those are just added bonuses. You can be Belichick, frankly, as long as you win. And I get in college athletics, you're a little bit more front-facing with the program. But as long as you win, that should be enough support for your program. And frankly, they just haven't won.
Right. It comes down to winning. Right.
Woodson
You're
gonna
right.
have what?
No, you're right.
This will be his third first-round pick, assuming Khalil Ware goes in the first round.
Yeah, Hood Schifino, Ware. Who am I missing? TJD was
Trace
second
was the
round.
first rounder. Third heralded, top 10 player in the program's history.
I thought he made TJD again. I think Mike Woodson made TJD better. I thought he got better and Ware got better.
Right, but it's
year.
like, again, how much are you celebrating the green room? How much are you celebrating, playing in the month of March? Because that has obviously been the bigger issue on that end. All right, pop quiz in a few, 317-239-1070. A pair of tickets to see good old Jelly Roll, is that right?
That's right. Yep. November.
Do you get the
at
tattoo, any of them, with the tickets?
Well, he says he regrets all his tattoos, so I would say probably
Well, he has
not.
a bunch of face tattoos. That's
Yeah.
why,
Correct.
right? He's got the face tats.
Correct.
All
yes,
right.
on that end. So we'll do that in a few. Let's do a morning check.
The Morning Checkdown. On 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
All right, let's start in the NBA. I mean, the big one last night, and we opened the show talking about it, the Knicks and Nets there in New York, they make a deal. And, boy, I tell you, we both think, KB, this is a pretty good pickup a great pickup for the Knicks as they're able to pry from the Nets. Mikal Bridges, who averaged about 20 a game, can shoot over 40% from three. Now, the Knicks did give up 4 unprotected first-rounders, 2025, 27, 29, and 2031. Also, a protected 2025 first-rounder via the Bucks goes to the Nets as well. So Bridges joins what looks like to be a pretty good Knicks team, potentially the second-best team in the East. He joins his Villanova brethren, if you will, in the Nets now 4 picks in next year's class, including their own. So that 2025 draft is going to be good, or big, I should say, for Brooklyn. And then to add one more thing on top of it, Woj reporting as well last night that the Knicks still feel like that they can go get OG Anunoby, who opted out of his player option within the last couple days. So the Knicks add Bridges, and they hope to add OG Anunoby. We'll see what happens with that, but obviously big news for the Pacers.
Yeah, I think this is tremendous by the Knicks. Again, they're a game away from the Eastern Conference Finals last year without Anunoby for 5 games, without Julius Randle for the entire series, and now theoretically they'd have those 2 back, and they add Bridges, who, to your point, Andy's been incredibly durable throughout his career. I think this is an attempt to, try and challenge Boston. And right now, I think I wouldn't have said this yesterday morning. I think the Eastern Conference is a clear number 1, a clear number 2. And then the Pacers are on the 3rd tier.
I would agree.
With several other teams.
I think that's fair.
I think it's a big move, and one that, again, on paper, it's chips in the middle of the table. Win now. It's exactly what the approach is for the Knicks. All right, tonight, NBA draft, 8 o'clock, round 1. Again, just round 1 tonight, 5 minutes for each pick. Round 2 will be tomorrow at 4 o'clock, 4 minutes for each pick on that. The Pacers currently do not select in round 1. Number 36, 49, and 50 for them. One element to the Knicks' move from last night. It does sound like Isaiah Hartenstein could be a cap casualty for this team. When you look at their roster makeup right now, does that open the door for Khalil Ware, for Zach Edey in round 1 for New York? The Knicks pick at 24 and 25. So right now, I do think that is a domino effect that we could be talking about tomorrow morning of the Knicks all of a sudden needing a center, maybe needing a rookie contract center. Could that be Edey? Could that be Ware? 2 very different stylistically, centers, really. Edey, to me, on paper, seems to fit a little bit more of Thibodeau and everything. But that will be something to keep an eye on as the draft starts tonight at 8 o'clock.
Yeah, baseball, we were all losers last night, right? Isn't that what we said? Mark, your Cubbies lost again. I'm sorry for
everybody,
that.
even the
5-1.
Indians.
Yeah, the Indians lost. Everybody lost right now. I mean, the Reds lost 9-5 to the Pirates. I mean, what do you want from me? What a bad night in baseball. Just what a bad night. My Yankees lost. They got pounded. I bet the Mets, so I guess I won. I'm sorry, Jimmy Cook, for that, but what a mess last night in baseball.
Monday Night Raw, which was in Indianapolis, posted its highest ratings since
really?
WrestleMania, so there's some positive news for you. So the news that WWE is coming to Indy for a long time, or for big shows, that's pretty good. It's pretty solid. Popped a big rating.
Again, Fever, the highest rated WNBA game in 23 years. That news came out yesterday. That was their game with the Sky on Sunday. They will be in Seattle tomorrow night, 10 o'clock for that tip. And we'll get the Colts training camp schedule late tonight, so we'll share that news with you tomorrow.
All right, let's get to our pop quiz. 239-1070. 317-239-1070. Pop quiz coming up next on this Wednesday.
Get matched with Cooler Z's this summer at Mattress.
Can you handle the pressure? Sharpen your pencils. It's time for the Pop Quiz with KB and Andy. Brought to you by Jiffy Lube, Indiana's favorite oil change since 1985.
All right, we got Jelly Roll tickets we're giving away here. Mark the date on this.
Oh, let me
Oh, I
look.
need to look at the-
It's in November. It's at Gainbridge.
It's in November,
Wasn't
yeah.
Jelly Roll here during the All-Star weekend, or was I imagining
Yes.
things?
No, that's true. November
he
7th.
was.
November 7th.
November
So
7th over at Gainbridge Fieldhouse.
that
We'll
is
give away-
that's a Thursday night.
give away those here all week long on the Pop Quiz. Andy Sweeney, number 1 through 8.
Let's go caller number 4 today. How does that sound? Caller number 4.
Throwback
Joe's-
NBA draft names on this Pop Quiz. I actually kind of like where we're going with this Pop Quiz.
There's some names here, man.
Josiah.
Josiah.
Hey, how's it going?
Josiah, how are you?
I'm doing great. How are you guys doing?
We are doing great. Congrats on the Jelly Roll tickets. Have you ever seen Mr. Roll?
I have not, no, sir.
Are you looking forward to it?
I am. Absolutely.
Your dog is
Is
excited.
that your canine in the background or somebody else's?
That is not my canine. I'm the FedEx delivery driver.
Oh,
watch
boy.
out then.
Gosh,
Be careful.
Dear Lord. Hope you're wearing pants.
You get barked at all day. Trust me, I know.
Man, that
All
sounds
day long,
brutal.
yes,
all
sir.
day.
Josiah, thanks for what you did. Hope the weather cooperates today for you. If you know the NBA draft, I think you've got a chance, actually, with this one. Andy Sweeney, go ahead.
All right, let's start question number 1. I'm going to butcher a few of these names coming up here in the next 5 questions. The NBA draft gets underway tonight. For the first time since 2020, the Pacers do not have a first-round pick. Now, which of the following Pacers draft picks was not selected in the second round, okay? Not selected in the second round. Was it Andrew Nembhard, George Niang, Goga Bitadze? Is that how you say it?
Bitadze, right?
Bitadze. But I got to be honest, I remember him very little. Or Lance Stevenson, again, who was not selected in the second round.
I'm going to go with Lance Stevenson.
Yeah, this guy was known most for trying to fight one of the assistant coaches in the Pacers at one point.
It's not Lance Stevenson. You want to try again?
Yeah, can you read me the options one more time?
Yeah, Nembhard, George Niang, Bitadze, as we talked about, and Lance Stevenson.
I'm going to go with George.
Sometimes the yogurt, is it Gogurt? Is that what it's called? I remember when this guy first was drafted, all I could think of was Gogurt.
I'm going to go with the third option then.
All right, here,
Thanks for the
Josiah.
hand.
We're going to move on. I'm tired of carrying you across the street. In
goodness.
2020, the Pacers had 1 second-round pick for their entire draft. Who did they take at 54 overall? Was it Cassius Stanley, Alize Johnson, Ike Anabogu? I forgot about him.
I did too.
Or some dude named Sandro.
Oh, man. You want to try that last name?
Hell no.
20, you said 2020?
2020, kind of a high flyer. That's who they took.
I remember him well.
Cassius, Alize, or Ike?
I'm going to go with EK.
Question number 3. On this day in 2003, LeBron James, the King, was selected with the number 1 overall pick by the Cleveland Cavaliers. Who went with the second pick? Oh, come on, this is easy. Melo, D-Wade, Darko, or Bosh?
Melo.
All right, number 4 here. Who won last night's WNBA Commissioner's Cup championship? Was it the Sun, the Lynx, the Storm, or the Liberty?
Let's go ahead and go to Storm.
Okay, take back what I said at the start of the pop quiz.
Yeah, I figured. Question number 5. The NHL Awards show takes place tomorrow night. That's what we're going to do the entire Friday show on, in the NHL
sounds
Awards.
riveting, yeah.
Which of the
Right up against the presidential debate, right?
Exactly. Which of the following players is not one of the 3 finalists for the Hart Trophy as the league MVP as voted on by the media? Connor McDavid, Nikita Kucherov, Nathan McKinnon, Austin Matthews.
I'm going to go with Nathan McKinnon.
Well, Josiah, enjoy the Jelly Roll concert.
Good luck, Josiah.
Certainly, you're going to want to forget about this pop quiz. Mercifully, he got Goga right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
And that's it.
18th overall. I remember they thought Goga was going to be like a top 10 pick. Cassius Stanley for 2.
Yeah, I mean, everyone remembers Arizona, right? Cassius Stanley? Am I wrong there?
Correct.
Duke, yeah. Okay, gotcha. Yep. And then Darko was taken after LeBron.
Yeah,
because Melo was third,
I
remember?
thought he'd get Darko right. That was a great draft.
That was the whole thing. Like, Detroit was so good that, they could take the flyer, and then they took the flyer, and now they stink. Melo, for whatever it's worth, one of the better players. The Minnesota Lynx won the Commissioner's Cup last night, and Austin Matthews is your answer for number 5 as not being one of the finalists. He plays for Toronto, in case you're wondering. We'll take a break. We'll come back. We'll wrap things up on this Wednesday. Wake Up Call, 93.5, 107.5 The Fan.
If one game can get you into the hockey.
It's the Wake Up Call with KB and Andy on 93.5 and 107.5 The Fan.
I'm picturing this song playing as we show up to the back nine for our golf outing here in a couple weeks, right?
Getting ready to hit a dribbler 35 yards. Yeah, I'm ready.
As long as it's not like us by Kendrick Lamar. This is another Kendrick Lamar song. As long as it's not like us, then we're in good company.
Jimmy Cook pounding one into the downtown sky there. Again, 3 weeks from Thursday, it'll be the back nine golf outing presented by Franciscan Health. It starts at noon. Can't wait. We were out there for a little shoot last week for that. And we had a great time last year. I've said this quite often about our show. We don't get a chance to do a lot of kind of like public events just based off our show time being in the morning. But had a blast just, talking with listeners and, hitting every bay. And that's kind of the cool thing about the back nine golf outing. It's, obviously everyone is right there on the same level. So a ton of interaction and great event. So think about some food, some drink, some golf, some fellowship, if you will. Coming up in a few weeks. That will be Thursday, July 18th.
And reminder, coming up tonight, 7 o'clock, will be the coverage. ESPN Radio's coverage of the NBA Draft. We'll have that right here on The Fan. The first pick will be shortly after 8 o'clock. I don't know, is is there a team to end things? Is there a team or a spot, I guess, that would interest you the most with Zach Edey? For me, I have been, obviously fit matters. For him, if he fell a little bit, and that means, going to a better team, to me, that's more valuable than him going like 10th overall, right? Or, going to Memphis. If he fell to the Miami Heat or the Knicks, or you mentioned these teams, the gold or the silver lining, if you will, is you have established general managers and presidents and coaching staff and everything like that. So many of the teams in the lottery, you don't have that, and that can harm your career. So if you fell a little bit and went to a better team, a playoff team, perhaps maybe less playing time. The flip side is more playing time, but on a bad team. That's always the yin to the yang, I guess.
If he goes to the Knicks, I will have the same reaction tomorrow morning that I had the morning after Trace Jackson-Davis went to the Warriors.
Okay.
I think the Knicks would be an ideal fit for Zach Edey, based off their roster construction, based off the need for a center, based off how they play the game. Zach Edey's a blue-collar hustler. That dude's diving on the floor up 18 in Assembly Hall. That fits exactly what the Knicks are about. And I think with all those guards and kind of wings that are interchangeable defenders around him, you could hide him a little bit better on that end of the floor. So, to me, that's the team. And again, 24 and 25, their first two picks. They also pick again in the 30s. So, New York is probably in a position now where they could, package some stuff and maybe move into the teams if they wanted to. And just where he goes. Khalil Ware, for me, it strikes as a little bit more of a younger team that's willing to kind of give him some minutes. I do think Ware can be kind of that, more of a modern fit. But, teams like Miami, teams like the Lakers, Toronto in that 19 range. I think I've seen Ware with Milwaukee and the Wizards kind of in the 20s as well.
Yeah, Milwaukee's 23, and you would have to think Bobby Portis leaves there this offseason, right? He was in on a 1-year deal. If you're thinking, if Khalil Ware got drafted there, you would think that Bobby Portis might be on the way out.
And then I guess on the Pacers front, try to get into round one if you can, the back end. If a guy like Ryan Dunn from Virginia would fall a little bit, I think if you're getting in the end of round one, it's that 3-and-D wing that you feel like can give you something this season. I know it's a logjam on paper right now, but still, if he can, prove something early in his career and help you out on that end of the floor, that could be there. If they do keep the second round, I do think kind of a backup center at some point is needed. And if you're going to keep all three picks, one of them has got to be international. I think, you don't have the room on your roster to keep all these guys. Throw a dart at the board internationally, see what happens there. I know that's not sexy by any means, but I think that's part of how the draft needs to operate.
Here in the last minute, I'm going to put up kind of a consensus of what the mocks say this morning. So many mock drafts coming up. I'll have that shortly after the show at 1075thefan.com. The reason I mention that is Kyle Boone of CBS. He has Khalil Ware falling to 37.
Oh, wow. I have not seen him out of round one many times.
I have not either, and I want to say even Boone did not have him in the second round. 37 would be after the Pacers.
Right.
That means the Pacers would have a chance to draft Khalil Ware.
Yeah, that is...
I just can't see that, can you?
I cannot, no.
I could see him fall. We could say, I guess... Ware's one of those guys. I think he's a first-round talent. I think his upside is a first-round
helped
talent.
His stock last year.
There's no doubt. If we come in here tomorrow and he's in the second round, that's going to be a little bit of a surprise.
8 o'clock, 5 minutes each pick. That is round one. Tomorrow, again, 4 o'clock for round two. 4 minutes on those picks.
Yeah, we'll have the podcast center. We'll have the podcast up, 1075thefan.com. Everyone have a good afternoon on The Fan.
Jake